Who are you?" The words had barely left my mouth when the silver wolf turned his head. For one impossible second, his hazel eyes held mine through the wrecked doorway of my mother's cottage. Not animal eyes, not fully. There was recognition in them. Fear, too, but not for himself. For me. Then something dark slammed into him from the side. The impact shook the porch. The wood cracked. I stumbled backwards, my boots skidding on the worn rug in front of the fireplace. The iron poker was still locked in my hands, my knuckles aching around it, but it felt suddenly ridiculous. A toothpick against nightmares. Outside, wolves moved through the lavender beds. Not dogs, not strays, wolves. Huge bodies slipped between the gum trees and the fence line, shoulders rolling, mouths wet, eyes shining too bright in the dark. One had a torn ear. Another dragged one hind leg but still moved fast enough to blur. They circled the cottage like they already knew every weak place in it. Nick's wolf guarded the gate. I knew it was Nick without knowing how I knew. The dark wolf fought with the same grim impatience Nick carried as a man, all hard angles and controlled violence. He didn't waste movement. He didn't snarl unless he meant to bite. The rogues were different. They lunged and snapped at anything close enough to hurt, wild and hungry, like rage had eaten the human parts out of them. Edgar's silver wolf rose from the broken porch rail. My heart kicked so hard it hurt. He was beautiful in the most terrifying way I had ever seen. Moonlight slid over his fur, turning him almost white at the edges. Blood streaked one shoulder, dark against silver. He placed himself in front of the open doorway again, blocking me from the night with his entire body. A low sound rolled out of his chest. Every rogue outside hesitated. I did too. The sound was not just a growl. It was a warning, a command. It pushed against my skin until the little hairs along my arms lifted. The torn-eared wolf tried him anyway. It launched at the doorway, claws carving lines into the porch. Edgar met it mid-air. They collided in a flash of teeth and muscle, and I saw, with sick clarity, how easily either of them could tear through me if they wanted to. The silver wolf twisted, drove the rogue sideways, and slammed it into the ground hard enough to rattle the window panes. Glass exploded behind me. I spun. A gray wolf forced itself through the kitchen window, scattering shards over the sink and the floor. Its lips peeled back from yellowed teeth. For one frozen heartbeat, I saw my mother's chipped blue mug on the counter beside it, still turned upside down to dry. Something in me snapped. "No," I said. The wolf sprang. I swung the poker with both hands. Iron cracked against its muzzle. Pain shot up my arms to my shoulders, but the wolf yelped and hit the sideboard, knocking Celine's little jar of teaspoons to the floor. It recovered too fast. Its head lowered. Blood dripped from its nose, and its gaze fixed on my throat. "Come on, then," I breathed, because apparently grief had taken my survival instinct and replaced it with stupidity. It lunged again. Silver filled the room. Edgar came through the doorway in a blur, hitting the gray wolf before it touched me. The force sent both of them crashing into the kitchen table. One chair splintered. I stumbled back against the fireplace, the poker raised, my breath trapped somewhere behind my ribs. The fight lasted seconds. It felt like years. When it was over, the gray wolf lay still, and Edgar stood over it, his sides heaving. He turned to me slowly. His muzzle was stained with blood. His eyes were still Edgar's. That was the worst part. If he had looked like a monster, I might have known what to do with my fear. Instead, he looked at me like the man who had stood beside my mother's grave, like the man who had held me when I broke, like the man I had nearly kissed before death and secrets tore the world open. Outside, his head snapped up. He went utterly still. No bark, no howl, no spoken order, just silence. Then the woods answered. Howls rose from beyond the road, deep and layered, rushing closer with frightening speed. The rogues heard them too. Their circle broke. One tried to flee toward the back fence, but a brown wolf burst from the trees and cut it off. Another pale wolf came low through the grass, swift as thrown light. More shapes followed, 3, 4, 5, moving with a discipline that made the rogue seem clumsy. Silver moon. I didn't know how I knew that either, but the word landed in my bones. The clearing erupted. Wolves slammed together beneath the gum trees. Nick drove one rogue away from the gate. The pale wolf leapt over the rosemary pots and caught another by the scruff before it reached the veranda. Edgar stayed nearest the cottage, never more than a few strides from me, no matter how many times the fight pulled at him. A rogue broke through the line. It came straight for the door. I lifted the poker again, though my arms trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. Edgar saw. The silver wolf moved faster than thought. He struck the rogue from the side and sent it tumbling into the lavender. Before it could rise, he pinned it down with one massive paw. The rogue's bones shifted. I gagged and looked away too late. Fur thinned, limbs shortened. Its jaws cracked into a human shape, though not fully. A man's voice rasped out of a wolf's bloody mouth. "The human makes the alpha weak." Edgar's snarl shook dust from the ceiling. The rogue laughed, or tried to. It came out wet and broken. Then smoke burst near the fence line. Sharp, bitter, chemical. The wolves recoiled. My eyes watered instantly. "Yvonne!" The voice was human. A lair? Maybe. I couldn't tell. A hand grabbed my arm from behind and yanked me away from the doorway. I swung before thinking. "Easy," Becky cried, ducking the poker by inches. "Oh my God. Remind me never to surprise you during a wolf attack." "Becky?" My voice cracked. She stood in my mother's sitting room, wearing a long coat over what looked like hastily pulled-on clothes. Her hair wild around her face. There was blood on her sleeve that didn't seem to be hers. "Hi," she said breathlessly. "Terrible timing, I know." Outside, the smoke thinned. The rogues were gone. Not dead. Gone. The sudden quiet left my ears ringing. I lowered the poker inch by inch. My arms felt detached from my body. The cottage smelled of blood, smoke, broken wood, and lavender crushed under paws. Celine's curtains fluttered in the cold air from the shattered kitchen window. My mother's house had survived poverty, shame, storms, and loneliness. Now monsters had bled on her floor. Edgar stood in the yard, still in wolf form, his head lowered. Several wolves moved around him, checking the perimeter. One large dark wolf with silver through its muzzle watched me from near the gate, and even before it shifted, I knew it was Brian Collins. Power had a scent, apparently. Or maybe I was losing my mind. The silver wolf backed away from the porch, his body convulsed. I gripped the mantle. The shift was not graceful. It was violent and intimate and wrong to witness, like watching a body remember a different shape. Bones cracked, fur receded, claws became hands pressed into the dirt. I turned my face away, breathing through my nose. When I looked again, Edgar was kneeling in the grass, bare-shouldered beneath a dark blanket someone had thrown around him. His head hung forward, damp hair falling over his brow. Blood ran from a gash near his collarbone down across his chest. He looked human. That did not make it easier. Nick appeared beside him in a pair of borrowed track pants, still breathing hard. "You're bleeding." Edgar ignored him and looked at me. Of course he did. I hated that some foolish part of me wanted to go to him. I hated more that I did. My legs carried me down the porch steps before my pride could stop them. Becky hovered at my side but didn't touch me. Smart woman. Edgar tried to stand when I approached. "Don't," I snapped. He froze. Good. At least one creature with fangs knew how to listen. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom," I said to Becky, my eyes still on him. "White box, second shelf." "I'll get it." She vanished into the cottage. Edgar's gaze moved over me, searching. "Are you hurt?" I laughed once, sharp and humorless. That is a very stupid question coming from a man bleeding on my mother's lawn after turning into a wolf. His mouth twitched, but it didn't become a smile. "Fair. Don't do that." "What?" Sounds like you. That hurt him. I saw it land. Becky returned with the kit. I took it from her and knelt in front of Edgar before I could think better of it. Up close, he smelled like rain, smoke, blood, and something warmer underneath that made my hands unsteady. I hated that too. Move the blanket, I said. His eyes held mine. Yvonne, move it, Edgar, before I staple it to you. Nick muttered behind me. She's handling this well. Nick, Edgar warned. What? She hasn't hit you yet. Still considering it, I said. That earned a quiet sound from Becky that might have been a laugh or a sob. Edgar shifted the blanket enough for me to see the wound. It was deep, but already closing at the edges, the skin knitting in a way that made my stomach twist. I pressed antiseptic to it anyway. He hissed through his teeth. Oh, good, I said. So the big bad wolf still feels deadle. His eyes warmed despite everything. Unfortunately. My fingers stilled against his shoulder. The warmth in his gaze was dangerous. Not because he was a wolf. Because he was Edgar, and I knew how it felt to be held by him. I knew how his voice lowered when he was worried. I knew the shape of his almost smile and the unbearable patience in his hands. The silence between us tightened. His skin was hot beneath my fingertips. Too hot. Alive in a way that made me remember the near kiss by the cottage. The breath we had almost shared. The grief he had stood inside with me without trying to fix it. Then I saw blood on his mouth again. My hand pulled back. Edgar noticed. Of course he did. He stayed perfectly still, letting the space open between us instead of reaching to close it. I am still the man who held you today, he said quietly. My throat burned. Around us, wolves moved through the dark. My mother's window was broken. There was blood in the lavender. My father's cruelty still sat somewhere in town, wearing a respectable face. And the man in front of me had just become a creature out of every nightmare I'd never believed in. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Then tell me why monsters came to my mother's house. Before Edgar could answer, Nick's voice cut across the yard. Edgar. Something in his tone made every wolf nearby turn. Nick crouched near the tree line, one hand pressed to the damp earth. Brian stood beside him now in human form, a coat buttoned wrong over his chest, his expression carved from stone. I rose slowly. What is it? Edgar asked. Nick looked from the ground to me. There are boot prints here, he said. Human. Fresh. The cold moved through me more surely than the night air. Nick's jaw tightened. Someone from Bowral led them straight to her.
The boot prints stayed with me longer than the blood. Blood made sense. Rogues made sense. Violence, however ugly, had rules I understood. Teeth met throat, claws met flesh. A threat crossed territory and was answered. But human boot prints in the damp earth behind Celine Hart's cottage meant someone had walked there willingly. Someone had known that small house with its lavender crushed beneath wolf paws. Someone had led monsters to a grieving woman before her mother's body was even cold in the ground. Yvonne stood beside me, still holding the fireplace poker as if she might take on the whole forest with it. Knowing her, she might have tried. Who? She asked. Nick rose from his crouch near the tree line. His face was grim, mud streaked across one cheek. Can't say yet, sense muddied. Whoever it was stepped through engine oil first, smart enough to mask themselves badly. Badly, Yvonne repeated. Enough that I know they meant to hide it. Nick looked at me. That matters. It did. Through the mind link, I sent the order sharp and cold. Sweep the road. No one leaves the perimeter until we know where those prints came from. Responses came back at once. Not words exactly, but impressions. Obedience, speed, teeth in the dark. My wolves moved through the trees. Yvonne's eyes flicked over my face. You just did something. I turned to her. Yes. With your head. With the pack. Her jaw tightened. Right, of course, because that's normal. Nothing about tonight is normal. No, she said, and looked past me to the broken kitchen window. It's my mother's house. That part should have stayed normal. I had no answer for that. There were apologies that became insults if spoken too soon. I had already given her too many truths late. I would not offer comfort she had not asked for and call it kindness. We need to move you, I said. Her eyes snapped back mine. No. Yvonne, no. Don't use that voice on me. What voice? The one that sounds like you're already deciding for everyone in the room. My wolf shifted under my skin, restless, wounded, furious that she stood in the open where rogues had just hunted her. I kept my hands loose at my sides. I am asking, I said carefully. Not deciding. She gave a short laugh. You people turn into wolves, have secret conversations in your heads, and now someone from my town might have delivered me to monsters. Forgive me if I'm not feeling generous. You don't have to feel generous. I stepped closer, then stopped when her fingers tightened around the poker. You only have to stay alive long enough to be angry with me properly. Something flickered across her face. Pain first, then the barest edge of the Yvonne I knew. Tempting, she muttered. Brian came up beside us, silent despite his size. In a borrowed coat and with silver threading his dark hair, he looked less like a man who had fought minutes ago and more like a judge deciding the fate of everyone present. Bowral isn't secure, he said. Not tonight. Yvonne looked at him. And your estate is? Yes. No embellishment, no reassurance wrapped in velvet, just certainty. Yvonne hated being cornered. I watched her swallow that hatred because she was also not foolish. Her gaze moved to the cottage, to the shattered window, to Becky carrying Celine's tea tin from the kitchen with careful hands. I'm not leaving her things for the police to toss around, Yvonne said. You won't, I replied. Take what matters. We'll guard the rest. She stared at me for a moment, as if searching for the lie. I let her. In the end, she nodded once. Fine. But if anyone touches my mother's notebooks without me, I'll haunt them while still alive. Nick murmured, noted. It took 20 minutes. She packed a little for herself. A jumper. Her mother's notebook. The suicide letter folded inside a worn envelope. A photograph of Celine laughing in the garden before life had learned where to hurt her. She took the chipped blue mug from the kitchen counter last, holding it so carefully that something in my chest went tight. I wanted to carry it for her. I did not offer. The drive back to Sydney happened in the blue-black hours before dawn. Nick drove. Becky slept in the back of the second car with her head against Alaire's shoulder, her earlier brightness dimmed by shock. Brian's wolves followed at a distance, some on foot through land humans thought empty, some in vehicles with headlights off. Yvonne sat beside me in the rear seat, Celine's box on her lap. She did not sleep. Neither did I. Every few minutes, her scent changed. Grief, fear, anger, exhaustion. And every time my wolf pushed at me to move closer, to cover her, to touch, to claim safety over what was not mine to claim. I stared out the window instead. You can smell it, can't you? She asked suddenly. I looked at her reflection in the glass. Smell what? Don't. Her voice was low. If wolves can smell fear, pain, lies, and God knows what else, don't sit there pretending you don't know I'm terrified. I turned fully towards her. The passing light slid over her face, catching the wetness she had not allowed to fall. She looked exhausted, furious, and so painfully brave I had to close my hand over my own knee to keep from reaching for her. Yes, I said. I know. And I'm trying not to make it worse. Her mouth softened for half a second. Then she looked away. That's annoyingly decent. I have moments. Don't push it. Despite everything, warmth moved through me. Small, dangerous, alive. Silvermoon's gates opened just after sunrise. The estate looked different under winter dawn, less like a wealthy family's private fortress, and more like what it truly was. Territory, stone walls, old trees, wide lawns silvered with dew, guards moving in patterns too smooth for ordinary security. Wolves watched from the tree line, some human, some not. All of them knew Yvonne had returned, not as my fake girlfriend, not as a convenient lie, as the woman rogues had hunted. Angela waited on the front steps in a cream coat, her hair pinned neatly, though her eyes gave away that she had not slept. She looked at Yvonne first, not me. "Come inside," she said. "There's tea, food, a room prepared." "No tea before truth," Yvonne said. Angela paused. Brian beside her almost smiled. Yvonne lifted her chin. "I'm grateful for the room. I'm grateful nobody let me get eaten. But I have been lied to enough by both humans and wolves, so if anyone plans to soften this with tea, I'll save us time and say no." Angela's expression shifted into something I had rarely seen from her with outsiders. Respect. "Fair," my mother said. "The truth, then." We gathered in the smaller sitting room because it had doors that closed and windows facing the eastern lawn. Yvonne sat on the edge of the sofa, Celine's box near her feet. She refused the blanket Becky offered, accepted the coffee Alaire brought, and watched everyone as if taking names for future retaliation. Brian stood by the fireplace. "Silvermoon is a pack," he said. "Not a club, not a family business, though we use businesses to protect ourselves. We hold territory through bloodline, loyalty, and law. I am alpha until Edgar succeeds me." Yvonne glanced at me. "Future alpha, right. Add that to the list of things I should have been told before dinner." "I know," I said. She looked back at Brian. He continued. "Every pack has ranks. Alpha leads. Beta enforces and protects. Nick is Edgar's beta. Wolves connected to a pack can mind link across distance, though strength depends on blood, rank and territory." Nick leaned against the wall near the door. "It's why we're rude without opening our mouths." "That explains so much," Yvonne said. Alaire coughed into his fist. Brian's mouth twitched, but he went on. "Scent matters. We read emotion through it. Fear, injury, deception, recognition. It is not perfect, but it is difficult to hide from a trained wolf." Yvonne's gaze slid to me again. I held it. "I won't use it against you," I said. "You already know too much." "Yes. At least you admit it. I would rather you hate the truth than trust a lie." That landed between us, quiet and heavy. Brian gave us a moment before speaking again. "Rogues are wolves outside pack law. Some are harmless, many are not. The ones who came for you tonight were organized. That means a leader." "Why me?" she asked. No one answered quickly enough. Angela moved then, taking the chair opposite Yvonne. "Because humans connected to alphas are vulnerable. A Luna is not only an alpha's wife. She becomes a center of loyalty, of stability, of bloodline if there are children. A human Luna is rare, and rare things are challenged." Yvonne's fingers tightened around her cup. "Is that why you didn't like me?" Angela's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained calm. "I never disliked you. You interrogated me over lunch." "I did. That's usually not a friendship ritual." "No," Angela said. "It was fear wearing bad manners." Yvonne blinked. Angela leaned forward slightly. "I was afraid for you. I was afraid of what the pack would do when they saw my son look at a human woman, as if she could bring him to his knees." The room went still. Yvonne did not look at me this time. I looked at her. I could not help it. Colour warmed her cheeks, not embarrassment alone. Something deeper, something that made my wolf lift his head. She set the coffee down carefully. And mate bites? My pulse slowed. Brian looked to me, allowing the answer. I stood, not because rank required it, but because this needed to come from me. A mate bite is a mark, I said, usually here. I touched the place where neck met shoulder, then dropped my hand. It binds scent, emotion, and instinct. It can open a private mind link. It tells the pack a bond exists, and that the person carrying it is under the alpha's protection. Under, she repeated. Beside, I corrected, if it is done right. And if it isn't, my jaw tightened. Then it becomes a chain. She watched me with those wounded, steady eyes. Would you? No. The answer came too fast for politics, too raw for the room. I took a breath. If you ever wear my mark, Yvonne, it will be because you choose it. Not because the moon demands it. Not because my wolf wants it. Not because the pack needs it. And certainly not because I was too weak to wait. Her lips parted slightly. For a moment the room disappeared. There was only her looking at me, as if I had given her something she did not know how to hold. Then she picked up her coffee again with both hands. Good, she said, voice rough, because I bite back. Allaire whispered, I love her. Nick said, unfortunately, same. That should have broken the tension. It did not. By evening, she looked ready to fall asleep standing and too stubborn to admit it. I walked her to the guest room at the end of the east corridor, the same room she had used before the world became honest between us. She stopped at the door, one hand on the handle. Back where we started. No, I said, not even close. Her shoulders trembled once. Cold, grief, shock. Maybe all three. I shrugged out of my coat before thinking and settled it over her shoulders. She stiffened, but she did not step away. My hands lingered at the collar a second too long, close to her throat, close to warmth, close to the place I had just promised never to mark without her consent. Her eyes lifted to mine. The hallway narrowed around us. She smelled of coffee, lavender, and rain-damp sorrow. I wanted to kiss her until the fear left her hands. I wanted to hold her until the night stopped reaching for her. Instead, I waited. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. My wolf went utterly silent. Then she whispered, not yet. The words scraped through me, tender and merciless. I stepped back at once. Then I'll wait. Her fingers curled in the edge of my coat. You say that like it's easy. It isn't. Something almost like a smile touched her mouth. Before either of us could ruin ourselves with honesty, footsteps sounded down the corridor. Nick appeared, carrying a sealed black envelope stamped with silver wax. My blood cooled. Yvonne saw my face change. What? Nick handed it to me. The Pack Council has summoned you. Dawn. I broke the seal. The message was brief, formal, poisonous. The council required the future Alpha to answer concerns regarding his judgment, his exposure of Pack secrets, and the human woman believed to be compromising Silver Moon's strength. Yvonne read it over my arm. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. They mean me. I folded the letter, feeling my wolf bare his teeth inside my chest. Yes, I said. They do.
I did not sleep after the council letter. I lay in the guest room with Edgar's coat folded over the chair, my mother's notebook under the pillow, and the knowledge that somewhere inside this elegant estate, old wolves with old opinions were preparing to discuss me like a loose brick in their precious wall. By morning, my eyes felt gritty, and my temper had sharpened itself into something useful. Nick found me in the kitchen before breakfast, staring into a cup of coffee strong enough to strip paint. "You look terrible," he said. I looked him up and down. "Are you always this charming before sunrise?" Only with people likely to be eaten because they don't know basic survival. I paused with the mug halfway to my mouth. Was that your version of an invitation? It was my version of an order. Try again. Nick's mouth flattened. He had the emotional range of a locked gate, but I was beginning to recognize the small signs. The slight shift in his shoulders meant irritation. The glance toward the corridor meant concern. Please, he said, as if the word had injured him. I took a slow sip of coffee. See? Growth. He muttered something under his breath that I suspected was not meant for polite human ears, then led me out through the back of the estate. The morning air was cold enough to wake me properly. Dew silvered the lawn. Beyond the gardens, eucalyptus trees crowded the edge of the property, their leaves whispering in a breeze that smelled faintly of rain and damp bark. 2 wolves waited near the training field, one russet, one gray, both watching me with unsettling intelligence. I stopped walking. Are they going to bite me? Nick glanced back. Not unless you do something stupid. That depends on your definition. With you? Broad. The russet wolf made a sound suspiciously like a laugh. Nick folded his arms. Lesson 1. Never run blindly. I wasn't planning on jogging into the jaws of doom. You ran from the estate 2 nights ago. I opened my mouth, closed it. Point to the emotionally constipated wolfman. Nick continued. If a wolf is hunting you, panic makes you predictable. Pick direction first. Door, car, high ground. Water if desperate. Never open space unless you have a head start. Helpful. Horrifying, but helpful. He pointed to the gray wolf. Watch your ears. The gray wolf lowered her head slightly, ears shifting back but not flat. Her shoulders rolled forward. Something in the air changed, though I couldn't have explained how. My body knew before my brain did. She's about to move, I said. The wolf lunged. I jerked back with a yelp that would have embarrassed me if I hadn't been busy remaining alive. The wolf stopped 2 feet away, tongue lolling in what looked very much like amusement. Nick nodded once. Good. You saw it. I saw my funeral. You saw the shoulders before the teeth. That matters. For the next hour, Nick taught me the language of bodies I had never known I needed to read. Ears, tails, stillness, weight in the haunches, the difference between curiosity and threat, the difference between a warning growl and one that meant I had already made a terrible life choice. The wolves moved around me, sometimes slow, sometimes fast enough that my heart slammed against my ribs. Nobody touched me. Nobody crowded me without Nick warning them off with a look. Eventually, I realized the field had gone too quiet. The wolves were looking past me. I turned. Edgar stood at the edge of the grass in a dark coat, his hair still damp from a shower, his face composed in that dangerous way men used when they were holding something back. The council meeting had left no visible wound, but I knew better now. Wolves bled in more than one way. You survived Nick's charm school, Edgar said. Barely. He teaches like a prison warden. Nick shrugged. She listens when threatened. I listen when properly motivated, I corrected. Edgar's gaze rested on me a moment too long. The air between us changed, warming despite the cold. I became painfully aware of my loose jumper, my boots damp with grass, the way his coat from last night had smelled like him when I folded it over the chair. Nick cleared his throat. I looked at him. What? You should know something else. He sounded almost bored, which I had learned meant he was about to ruin my day. Wolves smell fear, pain, lies. I already got that memo. And desire. The field went silent. My coffee, tragically, was not in my hand, so I could not throw it at him. Edgar closed his eyes briefly. Nick. What? She needs to know. I felt heat crawl up my neck. You're telling me every wolf here can smell when someone is attracted, Nick supplied. Yes, the russet wolf sneezed. I swear, I said, pointing at it. If that was commentary, I will find a rolled newspaper. Edgar stepped closer, his expression careful. Yvonne. I backed up 1 pace. No, you don't get to say my name in that calm voice after I find out half your family has been reading my emotional laundry through their noses. It isn't reading, he said. Don't defend the sniffing. His mouth twitched. I wasn't. I narrowed my eyes on him. Can you smell it? The question came out sharper than I intended. Too exposed. Too honest. Edgar's amusement faded. He looked at me the way he had outside my mother's cottage, as if the truth mattered more than his comfort. Yes, he said quietly. My stomach dipped. But I don't use it against you, he continued. And I don't assume it gives me permission. Assent is not consent. Attraction is not a promise. Fear is not weakness. Grief is not something I get to touch, because I can sense it. The words moved through me slowly, settling in places that still hurt. I wanted to make a joke. I wanted to tell him he sounded like a brochure for respectful werewolf behavior. Instead, I held his gaze and hated how much I wanted to believe him. If you ever use it to embarrass me, I said, I'll make silver jewelry fashionable. His eyes warmed. Noted. Before the moment could stretch too far, Becky swept onto the lawn, wearing sunglasses far too large for the weak morning light, and carrying a tote bag that looked expensive enough to require insurance. Good, she announced. Nobody's dead. We're going to Bondi. Nick stared at her. Absolutely not. Absolutely yes. She needs air that doesn't smell like testosterone and pack politics. Alaire appeared behind her with takeaway cups and pastries. I'm just here as emotional support, and because Becky promised croissants. Nick looked at Edgar. Tell them no. Edgar looked at me instead. Do you want to go? That should not have mattered. It did. I folded my arms. Will there be fewer teeth? Becky smiled brightly. Visible ones, yes. So the next dawn found me standing above Bondi Beach with wind whipping my curls loose and salt air filling my lungs. The world was blue and gold at the edges. Surfers moved like dark flecks in the water far below, but Becky led us away from the crowded stretch, along a coastal path toward a hidden pocket of sand, tucked beneath rock and scrub. Alaire carried coffee. Nick scanned every person we passed, as if expecting assassins in activewear. Does he ever relax? I asked Becky. Nick? Once in 2019. It upset everyone. I laughed before I could stop myself. It startled me. The sound felt rusty, like something dragged out from under grief and dusted off in the sun. Becky heard it too. Her smile softened, but for once, she didn't comment. Below us, movement flashed across the sand. A silver wolf burst from between two rock formations, fast and silent, paws striking wet sand in long, effortless strides. My breath caught. Edgar. There were other wolves with him, brown, gray, black, but my eyes found the silver one and stayed there. He ran like the world had been made for his body. Powerful, controlled, alive in a way that was almost painful to watch. When he turned, water sprayed beneath his paws, and the early sun caught in his fur until he seemed carved from moonlight even in daylight. I'd been afraid of that form. Part of me still was, but watching him run, I saw something beyond violence. Freedom. Joy. The wild part of him that did not make him less Edgar. Only more. The wolves disappeared behind the rocks. Minutes later, Edgar walked up the path in human form, dressed in dark jeans and a black jumper, his hair damp and curling at his temples. He was slightly breathless. I tried very hard not to notice. I failed so completely that Alaire made a choking sound behind his coffee cup. Edgar's gaze flicked over my face, then warmed with wicked accuracy. You're looking at me like you're deciding whether to throw something or kiss me. I lifted my chin. I multitask. His smile was slow. That sounds dangerous. It should. The others suddenly discovered great interest in the view. Even Nick, traitor that he was, turned his back. Edgar stepped closer, not touching, waiting. Always waiting. The wind tugged at my coat. He reached up, slowly enough that I could move away, and freed a curl caught near my mouth. His fingers brushed my cheek. The contact was small. It still felt like a spark catching dry grass. "You ran beautifully," I said, then immediately regretted sounding sincere. His eyes searched mine. "You weren't afraid?" "I was," I admitted, "but not only afraid." Something in his expression changed. Hope, maybe. Careful and restrained. I was tired of fear making every decision for me. I closed the distance first. His breath caught just before my mouth touched his. The kiss was soft at first, almost questioning. His hand hovered near my waist before settling there with careful pressure, steady but not claiming. I felt him hold himself back, and strangely, that made me step closer. My hands found the front of his jumper. Warmth moved between us, salt air and morning light, and everything we had not said since the cottage. When the kiss deepened, grief rose with it. Not gone, never gone, but held inside something gentler. I pulled back before I lost my nerve completely. Edgar rested his forehead near mine, not quite touching. Was that a decision? I swallowed. "Don't get smug." "Too late," I laughed again, softer this time. By the time we returned to Silvermoon, the estate had changed. I felt it before anyone spoke. Guards stood straighter. Wolves gathered near the front drive. Angela waited on the steps, her face smooth as glass. A black car rolled to a stop before the house. The woman who stepped out was tall, elegant, and stunning, in a way that looked sharpened rather than softened. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves over a tailored cream coat. She moved like she knew every eye belonged to her before anyone offered it. Edgar went still beside me. Angela's voice carried across the drive. "Yvonne," she said carefully, "this is Isla Shaw." The woman's gaze slid to Edgar first, intimate with familiarity, then came to me. Her smile was polished enough to cut. "I've heard so much about the human," she said.
"I've heard so much about the human," Isla Shaw said. My wolf did not like her tone. Neither did I. Yvonne stood beside me on the drive with Bondi salt still caught in her hair, and the warmth of our first real kiss still sitting dangerously close beneath my ribs. She did not move closer to me. She did not step back either. She only tilted her head, studying Isla with the calm expression she wore when someone had just made the mistake of underestimating her. "Lucky you," Yvonne said. "I'm still catching up on the wolves." Allaire made a strangled noise behind us. Isla's smile sharpened. She had always been beautiful, in the way old families prized, composed, elegant, every gesture trained until it looked effortless. The Shaws carried one of the oldest werewolf bloodlines in New South Wales, and Isla had been raised knowing that fact as intimately as her own name. Power clung to her, polished and perfumed, but power all the same. The council had not sent her here by accident. Behind her car, 2 black vehicles rolled through the gates. Brian's expression hardened. Angela, standing on the steps, went very still. Yvonne noticed both. Of course she did. "This isn't a social visit," she murmured. "No," I said. Her gaze flicked to me. "You knew." I suspected. "Next time, suspect louder." Before I could answer, Councillor Harker stepped from the first car, followed by 2 other elders in dark coats. They looked at Ayla, then at Yvonne, then at me. Their judgment moved quicker than their greetings. "Edgar," Harker said, "your father has granted us an audience." "My father grants you courtesy," I replied. "Don't confuse the two." Yvonne's mouth twitched. The council did not appreciate it. Good. Brian led us inside to the formal sitting room, the one used when old wolves needed to remember they were not kings. Dark timber panels lined the walls. A fire burned low in the grate. Silvermoon guards took discreet positions near the doors, and Nick stood close enough to Yvonne that no one could approach her without earning his attention. She noticed that too. She leaned toward him and whispered, "If you growl, I'm pretending not to know you." Nick did not look away from the elders. "I don't growl." "You absolutely do." A faint sound escaped Becky near the window. Isla took the chair opposite Yvonne with graceful precision. "It is brave of you to remain here after what happened in Bowral." Yvonne crossed one leg over the other. Was that a concern or inspection? Both, perhaps. Efficient. The room tightened. Harker folded his hands over the head of his cane. "We are not here to trade wit. Silvermoon has been attacked twice in connection with Miss Hart. Rogues have crossed lines they would not usually dare cross. The future Alpha has exposed packed truths to a human grieving and vulnerable, and now old enemies are circling." Yvonne's face did not change, but I heard the slight shift in her breathing. I hated them for that. Brian spoke before I could. "Choose your words carefully in my house." Harker inclined his head without apology. "We speak for the stability of the packs." "No," Angela said softly from beside the mantel. "You speak for fear of embarrassment." Isla's eyes moved to my mother, then back to Yvonne. "A Luna's position is not decorative. She must understand pack instincts, territory, blood feuds, scent politics, challenges, pups, grieving wolves, unstable adolescents, and alphas who cannot afford divided loyalties." Her smile returned. "Do you truly believe a human woman could handle that?" There it was, polished cruelty poured into fine china. Yvonne looked at Isla for a long moment. I felt every instinct in me strain toward intervention, but Yvonne did not glance my way. She did not need me to rescue her from a question. She set her hands neatly in her lap. "I handled Bowral," she said calmly. "Your dinner table won't kill me." Silence fell. Then Brian laughed once under his breath. My chest filled with something fierce and impossible to name. Isla's smile thinned. "Confidence is useful. Experience is better." "Then maybe stop talking long enough for me to get some." Allaire stared at the carpet like it contained religious revelation. Harker's patience cracked first. "This is precisely the concern. The role beside an alpha is not suited to impulse. Miss Shaw has been educated for such responsibilities. Her bloodline has stood with alphas for generations. She understands our customs. She would be a proper mate for Silvermoon's future." Yvonne went utterly still. Only I caught it. The small tightening of her fingers, the quick flash of pain she buried before anyone else could enjoy seeing it. Jealousy had a scent, yes, but hers was tangled with grief and dignity, and the refusal to be humiliated in a room full of strangers. I stood. Every eye turned to me. "No," I said. Harker's jaw clenched. "You will at least consider, I do not bargain with my future, and I do not choose women because old men are afraid of change." The words landed like a blade thrown into wood. Isla rose slowly. "Careful, Edgar." "I am being careful," I said. "If I were not, you would all have been escorted out after the first insult." Harker looked to my father. "Alpha Collins." Brian did not move. "You heard my son. He speaks from attachment. He speaks as the future Alpha of Silvermoon." That ended the formal conversation, though not the war behind it. The elders left with cold faces and colder promises disguised as courtesy. Isla lingered near the doorway, fastening the belt of her coat with deliberate patience. She looked at me. "The council will not forget this." I wasn't hoping they would. Then her gaze shifted to Yvonne. "Human hearts bruise easily." Yvonne smiled. "So do egos. Take care of yours." For the first time since I had known Isla Shaw, she had no immediate answer. When the door closed behind her, the room seemed to breathe again. Yvonne did not. She turned without a word and walked out. I followed her into the east corridor, ignoring Nick's warning glance and Angela's quiet, "Edgar, give her a moment." I had already given Yvonne too many moments alone with things that hurt her. She stopped halfway down the hall and spun around. "Don't ever do that again." I halted. "Refuse the counsel. Speak for me like I'm a disputed piece of furniture." The words struck harder than any claw. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Her eyes flashed. "That's the problem. You meant to protect me. You meant to make it clear you didn't want Isla. Wonderful. Very alpha. Very dramatic. But I was standing right there. You were. I have a mouth, Edgar. I'm aware. Don't be charming right now." I wasn't trying to be. Yes, you were. A little. Despite the anger in her voice, the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Only for a second. Then it vanished. I stepped closer, slowly. "You're right." That stopped her. I held her gaze. "I was angry. They reduced you to a weakness, a risk, a complication. Then they paraded Isla in like a solution. I answered as if my refusal was enough." My throat tightened. "It wasn't. I should have made room for your voice, not covered it with mine." Her anger did not disappear, but it changed shape. "I don't want to be defended like property," she said. "You aren't property. Then don't make me feel like the prize in a fight between wolves." I breathed through the sting of that. "I'm sorry." She searched my face, suspicious of how quickly I had said it. So I said it again. "I'm sorry, Yvonne." The corridor between us grew quiet. A winter draft slipped beneath the old windows, lifting a loose curl near her cheek. She looked tired suddenly. Not weak, never that. Just worn from standing upright while everyone aimed their expectations at her. "Was she what you were supposed to choose?" she asked. I knew better than to soften the truth until it became useless. "Yes." Her lashes lowered. "But I never wanted her," I said. "Not as a mate, not as a future, not even when wanting her would have made my life easier." Yvonne looked up again. "And do you often choose the difficult thing?" "Recently I've developed a taste for it." That sounds like a personal problem. It might be terminal. She should have laughed. She did not. Instead, she stepped toward me. I stepped back, giving her space. She stepped again. My shoulders met the wall. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you retreating?" "Because you're angry." "I'm also not fragile." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." She came close enough that I could feel the warmth of her through the narrow space between us. My hands remained at my sides, though every part of me wanted to touch her. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. My pulse became thunder. "Yvonne," I warned softly. "Don't use the patient voice. It's the only one keeping me alive." That almost got me a smile. Then she kissed me. Not softly, not carefully, not like the beach, where grief and morning light had made us gentle. This kiss had teeth in it. Her hands caught the front of my shirt, pulling me down as if she had lost patience with distance altogether. For one suspended second, I did not move. I let her choose the pressure, the angle, the hunger. Then she made a quiet sound against my mouth, and my restraint frayed. I touched her waist, only there, only enough to steady us both. She kissed like she argued, fully, fearlessly, with no interest in surrender unless it was mutual. Heat moved through me so sharply my wolf went silent, stunned into reverence. She was angry, she was jealous, she was grieving, she was alive in my arms, and I wanted her with a violence that had nothing to do with possession. When she pulled back, her breathing was uneven. So was mine. I rested my hand flat against the wall beside her shoulder, instead of reaching for more. "What was that for?" I asked. Her eyes held mine, bright and unashamed. not a reward, she said. I wanted to. The words undid me more thoroughly than the kiss. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. I ignored it. It vibrated again. Yvonne glanced down. If that's another councilman, I'm biting him myself. It's Nick. Worse, I answered. Nick's voice came through low and hard. You need to come to Brian's study, now. Yvonne straightened. What happened? I kept the phone to my ear, but I already knew from Nick's tone that whatever he had found was ugly. He continued. Your investigators pulled Kevin Hart's records, medical letters, specialist referrals, appointment notices. Some never reached Celine. My blood went cold. Nick's next words turned the corridor into something airless. Kevin didn't just hurt her emotionally, Edgar. He interfered with her medical care.
By morning, Kevin Hart had become a file on Brian Collins's desk. Not a father, not a grieving ex-husband. Not the respected man Bowrell smiled at in the street. A file, photocopied letters, medical records, appointment reminders. Notes from clinics I had never known existed. Specialist referrals with my mother's name typed neatly across the top, as if neatness could make betrayal less ugly. I stood over the desk and stared at one envelope until the words blurred. Second notice. Pelvic reconstructive consultation. Sydney. The date was from nearly 3 years ago. 3 years. Edgar stood beside me, silent and rigid, his hands clasped behind his back, like he was afraid of what they might do if left free. Nick leaned against the wall, expression carved from stone. This one was redirected, Nick said, tapping a copy with one finger. Sent first to Celine's cottage, then changed to Kevin's business postbox after a phone call from someone claiming to manage her affairs. I heard myself laugh. It was small and strange and had no humor in it. My mother managed everything alone, I said. Pain, bills, shame, me. But apparently not her own mail. Edgar turned his head toward me. Yvonne. Don't. My voice scraped, coming out. If you sound gentle, I'll break something. He went quiet at once. That was the thing about Edgar. He listened even when every line of his body said he wanted to step between me and the hurt. Nick slid another paper forward. There are also missed appointment fees. Notes from a nurse saying Celine seemed interested in treatment, then canceled after speaking with her former husband. Former husband. As if Kevin had ever truly left. He had abandoned the house, the bills, the bed, but not the power. Never the power. I pressed my palm flat to the desk. The wood was cool beneath my skin. Take me to Bowrell, I said. Edgar's jaw tightened. Today? Now. Nick straightened. We go with protection. I assumed you weren't planning to send me with a packed lunch and positive thoughts. Edgar's mouth twitched, but his eyes stayed dark. You don't have to face him today. Yes, I said. I do. The drive back to Bowrell felt shorter than it should have, maybe because grief had already stretched time so thin that distance meant nothing anymore. Silvermoon sent 2 cars besides ours. Nick drove ahead, Mara and Theo followed behind. Somewhere beyond the road, I knew wolves moved through scrub and trees where ordinary people would see only winter bushland. Edgar sat beside me in the back seat, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Almost. Neither of us crossed the space. When the first familiar shops appeared, my stomach clenched. Bowrell looked the same in the pale afternoon light. Bakery windows steamed, flower baskets hanging from shop fronts, locals pretending not to stare at the convoy of expensive black cars sliding through their streets. The town had always loved a performance. Today, apparently, I was it. Kevin was waiting outside Celine's cottage. Of course he was. He stood near the gate in a dark coat, clean-shaven, grief arranged across his face with the careful skill of a man who had practiced it in mirrors. Samantha hovered beside him, her gloved hands clasped too tightly. Joshua lounged near his car, one shoulder against the door, sunglasses on despite the weak sun. I reached for the handle. Edgar caught my wrist. Not hard. Just enough to ask. I looked down at his hand, then at him. I need to do this without you standing beside me like an executioner. His fingers loosened immediately. All right. Don't all right me if you don't mean it. A muscle moved in his cheek. I mean it. You'll stay back? At the gate. Farther. His wolf did not like that. I saw it in the flare of his eyes, the stillness that came over him like weather. But he nodded. Near enough if you call. I swallowed. I know. His thumb brushed once over the inside of my wrist before he let go. The touch was brief, warm, and almost unbearable. I got out before I could change my mind. Kevin's eyes flicked to Edgar behind me, then to the cars, then back to my face. My darling girl, he said. I stopped in front of him. Don't. His expression tightened for half a second before grief slid back into place. I know you're angry. Do you? You've been through a shock. Your mother was unwell for a long time. I tried to help where I could. Samantha looked down. There it was. Not guilt exactly. Something cheaper. Fear for herself. I turned to her. Did you know about the letters? Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I saw envelopes sometimes. Kevin handled things. He said Celine became upset when doctors pressured her. Doctors pressured her. My mother, who used to apologize when the kettle took too long to boil, had been made to sound hysterical even in absence. Kevin's voice lowered. Yvonne, complicated medical procedures aren't always kind. Your mother was fragile. I discouraged false hope. You intercepted her referrals. I protected her from disappointment. You isolated her. I kept scandal away from your door. I stared at him. For years I had thought hatred would be loud when it finally arrived. I had imagined fire, screaming, my hands shaking with the need to do damage. Instead, it came cold, clear. Behind Kevin, Joshua snorted, God, here we go, Saint Celine again. My head turned slowly. His smile was ugly. Everyone knew she had problems. You just hated anyone saying it. Samantha hissed, Joshua. What? She started it. Always swinging at people and acting shocked when someone swings back. My fingers curled. Not into fists, into restraint. Kevin stepped forward, sensing the old shape of things, the familiar moment where he could turn my anger into proof against me. Yvonne, he said softly, look at yourself, surrounded by strangers who don't understand you. Do you think Collins will stay when this becomes inconvenient? Men like him don't marry trouble from Bowral. They enjoy it for a while. Then they go back to women who belong in their world. The words should have found old wounds. Maybe they did, but old wounds were not doors anymore. I glanced past him. Edgar stood near the road, exactly where I'd asked him to stay. Every line of him was controlled fury. He could have crossed the distance in a heartbeat. He did not, because I had asked. That steadied me more than any promise could have. I looked back at Kevin. You don't get to mourn her in public after killing her in private for years. His face changed. Only for a second, but I saw it. The grief mask cracked, and beneath it was rage. Real rage. The kind he had always saved for rooms without witnesses. You should be careful, he said. I smiled. You first. Nick appeared at the edge of the path then, silent as a shadow. He didn't touch me, didn't threaten Kevin. He simply existed there with enough menace to make Joshua push off his car and stop smiling. Mara moved toward Samantha with a polite expression and a phone already recording. Mrs. Hart, Mara said, you mentioned envelopes. Samantha's face went tight. Good. Let them all start choosing which parts of Kevin they wanted to sync with. I left them there and walked into my mother's cottage. The smell hit first. Lavender, smoke, damp wood. Faint traces of antiseptic from where I'd cleaned Edgar's wound. Underneath it all, Celine's soap still clung to the hallway, gentle and ordinary enough to hurt more than blood. The broken window had been boarded. The rug near the fireplace was gone. Someone had cleaned the floor, but I still knew where the rogue had fallen. I knew where Edgar's silver body had blocked the door. I knew where my mother's life had ended before monsters ever arrived. I went room by room with a cardboard box, her cardigan from the hook behind the bedroom door, the tin of sewing needles, a small bottle of lavender oil, the notebook from her bedside drawer, a scarf she had worn to church because she said yellow made winter less rude. Each item weighed more than it should have. By the time I reached the kitchen, my hands had begun to shake. I opened the pantry for her tea tin and found a stack of envelopes tucked behind flour canisters, old ones, unopened. My name left me, not as a sob, not quite, just air. I pulled them out with clumsy fingers. More appointment notices, a letter from a charity clinic offering reduced surgery costs, a handwritten note from a nurse named Helen saying, "Celine, please ring me back when you're ready." There are options. There had been options. My knees gave way. I reached blindly for the bench and missed. Edgar. He was there before I hit the floor. Not before I called. Not before I reached. Only after. His arms came around me, solid and warm, lowering us both beside the kitchen cabinets. I grabbed the front of his coat and held on with everything I had left. "She could have had help," I said into his chest. "She could have had help." "I know." He took it from her. "I know." Edgar's voice was rough enough to break on. He held me like something precious but not fragile, one hand firm between my shoulder blades, the other cradling the back of my head. After a while, he drew back just enough to look at me. His thumb brushed a tear from my cheek. "I'm here," he said. The words were simple. Maybe that was why they undid me. He bent and kissed my forehead, lingering there as if grief had a temperature, and he could draw some of it out through touch. Then he lifted my hand from his coat and kissed my knuckles one by one. Not dramatically, not possessively, reverently. My breath caught. I leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, salted with tears, more ache than hunger, but real enough that his whole body went still before he kissed me back with devastating care. When I pulled away, his eyes stayed on mine. No demand, no victory, just Edgar. Footsteps sounded on the porch. Nick appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression so grim the warmth between us vanished. "What?" Edgar asked. Nick looked at me first, then at him. "Theo followed Joshua after he left," he said. "He met someone near the old woods behind the fire trail." My fingers tightened around Edgar's. Nick's jaw flexed. "I caught the stranger's scent on the wind," he said. "Rogue."
By the time I took Yvonne to the rocks, everyone at Silvermoon had told me it was a bad idea. Brian called it unnecessary exposure. Angela called it poor timing. Nick called it, with his usual gift for elegance, romantic stupidity with witnesses. Yvonne called it something else. "Is this a date?" she asked, standing near the front steps in Edgar's coat from the night before. "Or a security exercise with overpriced drinks?" "A quiet evening," I said. Her brow lifted. "With Nick following us?" Nick, already beside the car, did not blink. "I'm decorative. You look like a threat in a jacket." "I can be both." For the first time in 2 days, Yvonne laughed without catching herself halfway through. That decided it for me. The rocks glowed under winter light when we arrived. Market stalls lined the old lanes, their canvas roofs strung with bulbs that warmed the sandstone walls. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, rain on cobbles, coffee, wool scarves, and the harbour beyond. Humans moved around us in laughing clusters, bundled in coats, carrying paper cups and shopping bags, unaware that the man leaning against a lamppost behind them could break a wolf's neck before they finished blinking. Nick stayed close enough to protect, far enough not to intrude. Mostly. "He's staring at that man like he owes him money," Yvonne murmured. "He thinks the man's carrying a concealed knife." "Is he?" No, he's carrying a souvenir bottle opener shaped like a kangaroo. She looked at me. You can smell that? I can hear it knocking against his keys. She sighed. Of course you can. I offered her my hand before we crossed the lane. She stared at it. If you say this is for balance, she warned, I'll make you regret having fingers. It isn't for balance. Her gaze lifted to mine. The market noise moved around us. Vendors calling, tourists laughing, a busker playing guitar somewhere near the steps. But for a moment, there was only the space between my open hand and her choice. Then she placed her hand in mine. Her fingers were cold. Her grip was firm. I closed my hand around hers and did not pretend it was accidental. We walked slowly because she kept stopping. Lavender soap at one stall, hand-thrown mugs at another, a rack of ridiculous knitted beanies with animal ears that made her threaten to buy one for Nick. He'd burn it, I said. He'd wear it if Becky cried. That is unfortunately true. At a hot chocolate stall tucked beneath an awning, Yvonne ordered the largest cup available and added marshmallows with the grim determination of a woman preparing for battle. I paid before she could protest. She narrowed her eyes. That was suspiciously smooth. I've negotiated international contracts. With marshmallow vendors. Only the difficult ones. She shook her head, but her mouth curved. We took our drinks down a narrow sandstone lane where the harbour lights flashed between old buildings. The bridge rose in the distance, iron bones against a deepening blue sky. Yvonne stood beneath a street lamp, steam curling from her cup. And for a few seconds, she looked softer than she had allowed herself to look since Bowral. Not healed. I knew better than to wish grief gone for my comfort, but present. Still here, still holding my hand. I miss laughing with you, she said quietly. The admission struck deeper than I expected. I looked at our joined hands. Her thumb rested against my knuckle, not moving away. I miss being the reason you do. She swallowed, eyes fixed on the harbour. Sometimes it feels wrong. Laughing. Being happy for 5 seconds. Her voice thinned but did not break. Like I'm leaving her behind. I stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. Celine laughed with you over burnt toast and terrible motel guests. She planted lavender because she liked stubborn things that survived bad soil. I don't think your happiness betrays her. Yvonne looked at me then, and the raw gratitude in her eyes nearly brought me to my knees. You're getting very good at saying things that make me want to be nice to you, she said. That sounds dangerous. It is. I'm deeply uncomfortable. I smiled. Would insulting me help? Probably. Take your time. Her laugh was softer this time. The old street lamp above us flickered, casting gold over her face. The urge to touch her arrived with such force that my wolf went still, watching. I lifted my free hand slowly, giving her every chance to step away, and brushed a loose curl back from her cheek. She did not move. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. The market seemed to fade behind us. Edgar, she whispered. I did not know if it was permission or warning. I leaned closer anyway, slow enough to stop if she breathed no. Then the wind changed. Rogue. The scent cut through chocolate and harbour salt like a blade through cloth. Wet fur, old blood, bitter adrenaline, not one, several. Nick's voice entered my mind, low and immediate. 3, North Lane, one behind the stall. I shifted my body in front of Yvonne. She noticed instantly. What? Stay close. Her cup lowered. That means teeth, doesn't it? Not if I can avoid it. A man stepped from the mouth of the lane. To human eyes, he was ordinary enough. Dark hoodie, hands in pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. To mine, he was wrong. Too still, too focused. His pupils reflected gold where no light touched them. Another moved behind us. Humans passed at the far end of the lane, laughing over paper bags and mulled wine. Phones in hands, children nearby, too many witnesses. I could not shift. Neither could Nick. The first rogue lunged. I caught his wrist before the knife reached my ribs and drove him back into the sandstone wall. The impact was muffled by distance and music, but stone cracked beneath his shoulder. His nails lengthened against my sleeve, claws trying to break free. I slammed my forearm under his jaw. "Not here," I growled. He smiled with blood on his teeth. "That's the point." Behind me, Yvonne moved, not away, to the side. "Duck," she snapped. I did. Her hot chocolate hit the second attacker square in the face. He swore, blinded by sugar, heat, and marshmallows. Nick came out of the shadows and struck him once in the throat, dragging him backward into the narrow gap between two closed shop fronts. Yvonne stared after them. "That was $6. "I'll buy you another," I said. "Focus, Collins." The rogue in front of me twisted free with inhuman strength. His blade opened a line across my forearm. Pain flashed, sharp but manageable. I forced him low, shoved him into a stack of empty crates, then heard the third moving too fast toward Yvonne. My control thinned. I reached her before he did, seized her around the waist, and pulled her into a narrow passage between an iron gate and the sandstone wall. Her back met the stone. My body covered hers before thought caught up with instinct. The rogue missed us by inches, skidding past into the lane. Nick intercepted him. The fight blurred beyond the passage, shadows snapping, bodies hitting stone, breath and restrained violence. I stayed over Yvonne, one hand braced beside her head, the other at her waist. She was breathing hard. So was I. Her hands gripped my coat. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "It's not serious. You always say that when you're bleeding." I'm often right. Annoying habit. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady on mine. The passage was too narrow. Her warmth pressed through the front of my coat. My hand still held her waist, and every instinct I possessed wanted to keep her there, safe beneath me, away from every blade and tooth in the world. Her gaze moved to my mouth again. My breath roughened against her cheek. This was no place for tenderness, no place for want. There were rogues 10 feet away, and humans close enough to scream if they saw what we were. Still, she lifted her chin, only slightly. "Enough to ruin me." "Yvonne," I said, and her name came out less controlled than I intended. "Don't start with the noble restraint speech." I wasn't. Liar. I almost kissed her then. God help me, I almost did. A scream tore through the lane. Yvonne flinched against me. I turned. A woman at the mouth of the market had dropped her shopping bags. One rogue had broken free from Nick and staggered into the light, his face half shifted, jaw too long, teeth wrong for any human mouth. "Stay here," I ordered. Yvonne's eyes flashed. "Try saying that less like a king." "Please." She blinked. "Better." I left her with more effort than the fight deserved. The rogue saw the woman scream and grinned. He wanted exposure, panic, phones, proof that monsters existed. I moved before the crowd understood what they were seeing. To them, perhaps I was only fast. To him, I was alpha. I struck from the side, driving him out of the lamplight and into the shadow of the lane. Nick was there at once. Together we took him down silently enough that the busker's guitar still carried over the sound. The first two rogues fled when they realized they had failed to draw blood publicly. Theo and Mara, stationed farther out, gave chase through the back streets. I returned to the passage. Yvonne stepped out before I reached her, jaw tight, eyes scanning me from head to foot. "Don't you dare ask if I'm hurt before you look at your arm." I looked at my arm. "There," I said. Looked. "You are a deeply irritating man." Yes. Her fingers caught my sleeve, careful around the blood. The contact was small, but after the passage, it landed like a brand. Nick appeared behind us, breathing evenly, a dark smear on his collar. We need to move. Witnesses? I asked. Confused, no clear footage. Becky's already handling social chatter with 3 teenagers and a lie about a film stunt. Yvonne stared. Becky can do that? Nick gave her a flat look. Becky could destabilize a government if given Wi-Fi and lip gloss. I almost smiled. Then I saw what he held. A small glass vial lay in his palm, stoppered with black wax and wrapped in a strip of old leather. The liquid inside was clear, almost silver beneath the market lights. Across the label, written in old pack script, was a warning I had not seen outside restricted archives. My blood cooled. Yvonne looked between us. What is it? Nick's expression had gone colder than the winter air. Moonthirst, he said. The name moved through me like remembered fire. I took the vial without touching the wax. Even sealed, it carried a faint scent. Sweet, metallic, wrong. My wolf recoiled and surged forward at the same time. Yvonne noticed. Edgar? I looked down the lane where the rogues had vanished, then back at the vial meant to destroy judgment, restraint, and every boundary I had built around her choice. Nick spoke quietly. That dose wasn't meant for me. No, it had not been meant for Nick. I closed my hand around the leather wrap and felt the trap taking shape in the dark. Someone had brought Moonthirst into Sydney, and they had intended to use it on me.
Silver Moon did not feel like a mansion when we returned from the rocks. It felt like a body holding its breath. Guards stood at every entrance. Wolves moved through the grounds beyond the windows, their shadows slipping between trees. No one laughed in the hallways. Even Becky, who could usually weaponize cheerfulness in a crisis, sat on the edge of a chair in Brian's study, with her hands twisted together. Edgar stood near the fireplace while the healer cleaned the cut on his forearm. He had refused to sit. Naturally. "You're bleeding on an antique rug," I said. His eyes flicked to mine. "I've been told it improves the value." "By whom? A vampire?" Allaire opened his mouth, then closed it when Nick looked at him. On Brian's desk, beneath a glass containment dome, sat the vial Nick had found in the lane. Moonthirst, the name alone made the room feel colder. The healer, a silver-haired woman named Sabine, leaned closer to Edgar's wound and went utterly still. "What?" Angela asked. Sabine did not answer immediately. She lifted Edgar's wrist, inhaled carefully, then looked at Nick. The vial was not the only delivery method. Nick's expression hardened. "The blade?" "Yes," Sabine's voice lowered. "Trace amounts in the cut." The room shifted. Not physically, nothing so obvious, but every wolf in it changed at once. Edgar's face went blank in a way I had learned to distrust. Brian stepped forward. Angela's hand tightened against the back of Becky's chair. Nick swore under his breath, something old and sharp that did not sound entirely human. I looked at Edgar's arm, then at my own hands. His blood had been on my fingers in the alley. I had pressed my scarf to the wound before he could stop me. My knuckles were scraped from the sandstone wall, small cuts I had barely noticed until they started to sting. Sabine followed my gaze. Her eyes closed briefly. "Yvonne." "Oh, good," I said. That tone usually means wonderful news. Edgar moved toward me. Sabine stopped him with one word. "No." He froze. My skin prickled. "What does it do?" I asked, because if everyone was going to stare like I had swallowed a grenade, I preferred instructions. Sabine looked at Brian first. He gave one short nod. "Moonthirst is forbidden," she said. "It was created to force instinct to the surface. It heightens scent, touch, desire, territorial aggression, emotional honesty. In wolves, it can awaken mate hunger so violently that judgment becomes difficult." My gaze betrayed me. and slid to Edgar. His had never left me. The air between us seemed suddenly too thin. I swallowed. And in humans? We don't have many records. Humans usually react less strongly, but exposure through broken skin is unpredictable. Sabine's expression softened, especially when there is already an attachment. Attachment. Such a tidy little word for the chaos standing 6 feet away from me with blood on his sleeve and gold beginning to burn faintly through his hazel eyes. From near the window, Isla Shaw spoke for the first time. So that was the plan. I had forgotten she was there. That annoyed me. She stood apart from the family, elegant in a dark coat, her expression controlled but not comfortable. The council had insisted she remain at Silvermoon after their meeting, apparently for continued discussion. I had several discussions in mind for them, most involving furniture and poor aim. Angela turned toward her. What do you mean? Isla's mouth tightened. If Edgar were exposed near me, the council could claim instinct had made its preference known. A future alpha overwhelmed by moonthirst beside the woman they wanted for him. Her eyes flicked to me. It would not need to be true. It would only need to look convincing. My stomach twisted. Jealousy came first, hot and humiliating. Then fear. Then something worse, understanding. Old men deciding which woman should stand where. A drug to turn Edgar's body into evidence. My existence reduced to an obstacle to be removed by scandal. Kevin would have admired the efficiency. Edgar's voice cut through the room, low and dangerous. Get her out. For half a second I thought he meant me. Then Isla's shoulders stiffened. Nick was already moving. Miss Shaw, Isla lifted her chin. I had no part in this. I hope not, Edgar said. For your sake. She looked as if she might answer, then thought better of it and let Nick escort her from the room. The moment the door closed, Edgar turned away from me. That hurt more than it should have. Edgar, I said, don't come closer. The words were rough, not cruel, controlled with effort. Sabine opened a black medical case. The safest course is separation until it burns out. 8 hours, perhaps 10. Sedatives can make alpha physiology unstable under moonthirst. Convenient, I muttered. Edgar's mouth almost moved. Almost. Then his jaw clenched, and the humor died. I noticed everything suddenly. The faint cedar scent of him beneath blood and rain. The flex of his fingers at his sides. The sound of his breathing, too measured to be natural. The memory of his body shielding mine in that narrow passage returned with vicious clarity. His hand at my waist, his breath against my cheek. The kiss we had not taken. Heat moved under my skin. Not gentle, not reasonable. I hated that a drug could find something real and twist the volume higher. Edgar looked at Sabine. Prepare the east room. Angela's face tightened. Edgar, I won't risk her. I'm standing here, I said. His eyes snapped to mine. For 1 second the room disappeared. There was hunger in his face, yes, but it was caged behind something stronger. Fear. Not of me. For me. I know, he said quietly. That is exactly why. No one argued after that. The east room turned out to be less bedroom and more beautiful prison. Old timber door, reinforced lock, wide windows barred discreetly from the outside, thick curtains drawn against the moonlight. Edgar walked inside without touching me once. I hated him a little for it. I respected him more. He stood on the other side of the threshold, one hand wrapped around the doorframe. His knuckles were white. Go with my mother, he said. I'm not leaving. Yvonne? No. I folded my arms, which was a terrible idea because my body had become overly aware of every inch of itself. You can sit in there being tragic and noble. I'll sit out here being irritating and supervised. His eyes closed. You don't understand what this feels like. Then explain. His laugh was quiet and broken. That would not help either of us. He shut the door. The lock turned. For a while I just stared at the wood. Then I lowered myself to the floor with my back against it. From somewhere down the corridor, Angela said softly, "I'll be nearby." "I know." She did not try to move me. Another point to Angela Collins. Inside the room, Edgar paced. I could hear him too clearly. Each step, each pause. Once, the muffled sound of his fist meeting the wall. I pressed my palm flat to the door. "If you damage the house, I'm telling your mother." His voice came through the wood, strained but amused. "She'll believe you." "She should. I'm trustworthy. You threw hot chocolate at a rogue. It worked." "Yes," he said. "It did." Silence settled, but it was not empty. It was full of him. I rested my head against the door. "Does it make you want Isla?" "No." The answer came so quickly something loosened in my chest. Then he added lower, "It makes me angry that someone tried to use her body and mine to lie." I closed my eyes. There he was, still Edgar, still refusing the easy ugliness. My voice came out softer. "What does it make you want?" The quiet stretched so long I almost took the question back. Then his hand touched the other side of the door. I felt the faint vibration through the wood. "You," he said. My breath caught. "My wolf wants you. I want you. But not like this. Never like this." The words struck somewhere deep and bruised. No man in my life had ever treated want like something that needed permission to exist. Kevin had taken my mother's choices one envelope at a time, one cruel word at a time, until her life shrank around his decisions. Now Edgar sat on the other side of a locked door, drugged and hurting, protecting my yes from everything, including himself. My throat burned. "I want you too," I whispered. His breathing changed. "But I don't want anyone stealing that from us," I said. "Not rogues, not council, not some little bottle with a dramatic name." A rough sound left him, almost a laugh. "Moonthirst is a dramatic name. Extremely. Whoever named it needed hobbies." Hours passed like that. We talked through the worst of it. Not constantly. Sometimes his answers came clipped and careful. Sometimes mine did. We spoke about nothing when the wanting became too sharp. Becky's shopping habits, Nick's tragic personality, Alaire's ongoing inability to survive a serious room. And sometimes we spoke about things that mattered. "I'm afraid of becoming something that cages you," Edgar admitted sometime before dawn. "You're doing a terrible job," I said. "This is the most respectful locked-door seduction in history." "Yvonne?" "I know." I flattened my fingers against the gap beneath the door. "You don't cage me." His fingers appeared from the other side. He did not grab. He waited. So I touched him first. Just fingertips beneath old wood, barely enough contact to count. It counted anyway. His skin was warm. His hand trembled once, then steadied around mine with heartbreaking care. We stayed like that until the black outside the windows softened to gray. The fever in my blood thinned slowly. The air stopped pressing so hard against my skin. Edgar's scent faded from overwhelming to familiar. Safe. I was exhausted enough to cry and too tired to bother. My breathing hitched. Then his voice came, clear as if he knelt beside me. "Yvonne, breathe." I went still. The words had not come through the door. They had come from inside my head. Edgar's fingers tightened beneath the gap. On the other side of the locked room, he whispered, "You heard that?" My heart began to pound. We were not marked. We had not chosen any bite, any bond, any ancient wolf magic with teeth. But somewhere between the drug, the door, and the dawn, something had opened anyway. For several seconds after Edgar's voice appeared inside my skull, neither of us moved. His fingers stayed curled around mine beneath the door. Mine had gone stiff, not because I wanted to pull away, but because my brain was busy trying to decide whether panic, awe, or sarcasm should win first. Naturally, sarcasm limped over the finish line. "Collins?" I whispered, staring at the bottom of the locked door. "If you've started haunting me, I'm charging rent." A rough, exhausted laugh came from the other side. "You heard me." Yes. My throat tightened around the word. I heard you. The lock turned a few minutes later, but Edgar did not open the door himself. Sabine did, with Angela standing behind her in a dressing gown, and the expression of a woman who had not slept but intended to remain elegant out of spite. Edgar stood several steps back from the threshold. His hair was disordered. His shirt was wrinkled. Dark shadows marked the skin beneath his eyes, and the bandage on his forearm had bled through at the edge. But his eyes were hazel again, clear and terribly careful. He looked at me like I was both a miracle and danger. Sabine checked him first, then me. She pressed cool fingers to my pulse, looked into my eyes, asked questions that made me want to ask whether healer training included being calmly invasive before breakfast. The drug has faded, she said at last. From both of you. Excellent, I said. Then I'd like coffee and perhaps a written apology from whoever invented werewolves. Angela's mouth curved faintly. Edgar did not smile. He was still watching me from across the corridor, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. Too loose. Deliberately loose. Sabine glanced between us. The mind contact? Brief, Edgar said. I lifted a finger. Brief, but extremely rude. Nobody knocked. It may be resonance, Sabine said. A bond reaching before a mark. Rare, especially with a human, but not impossible under stress, exposure, and... She paused. And what? I asked. Angela's gaze softened. Sabine closed her medical case. And choice. That word stayed in the corridor after she left. Angela touched my shoulder once as she passed. Breakfast will be sent up. If either of you pretend you are fine, I'll know. That is unsettlingly motherly, I said. It is meant to be. Then she left us alone. The silence that followed was different from the night. No door, no drug clawing through my blood, no urgent excuse for what I felt when I looked at him. Edgar made no move toward me. You can come closer, I said. Can I? The question undid something soft and painful inside me. I walked to him instead. His breath caught, barely, but he stayed still. When I stopped in front of him, there was only a handspan between us. He smelled like soap, cedar, old smoke from the fire, and exhaustion. Familiar. Safe. Dangerous only to my ability to think sensibly. The moonthirst is gone, he asked. Sabine said so. And you feel clear? I feel hungry, tired, emotionally bruised, and deeply annoyed that your voice has private access to my head. His eyes warmed. That sounds like you. It is me. I lifted my hand and placed it against his chest. Beneath my palm, his heart beat once, hard. I'm choosing this, I said. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then returned to my eyes. Yvonne, no noble speech. I was going to say I'm very grateful. Oh, I narrowed my eyes. Fine, that one may continue. But he didn't continue. So I rose onto my toes and kissed him. This time there was no fountain, no fake audience, no grief-soaked accident, no drug-burning holes through our restraint. Just morning light in an old corridor, and Edgar standing perfectly still until he knew I meant it. Then his hand came to my waist, careful, warm, asking even after I had answered. I kissed him again for that. He made a low sound against my mouth, and the last brittle part of the night inside me cracked open. He kissed like he was holding back an entire storm for my sake, and somehow that made the storm more beautiful. When I drew away, his forehead rested lightly against mine. Inside my chest, something tugged. Not pain, not even fear. A thread. I looked up at him sharply. He had felt it too. I knew before he spoke because his hand flexed once at my waist. We need to understand what's happening, he said. Yes, I agreed. Right after coffee. By mid-morning, Silvermoon had returned to its usual state of pretending not to be in crisis while absolutely being in crisis. Guards moved with purpose. Brian vanished into meetings with Nick and 3 wolves who looked like they could frighten furniture into obedience. Angela oversaw the house with terrifying calm, Becky brought me a tray so full of food I suspected she thought human grief required carbohydrates every 30 minutes. I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I found myself in the lower hall, watching one of the kitchen staff struggle with a tray and a limp she was clearly trying to hide. "Give me that," I said. The young woman blinked. "Miss Hart, I couldn't." "You could. You should. You're about to drop soup on a rug that probably cost more than my first car." She reluctantly handed it over. Her name was Tessa. She had twisted her ankle 2 nights earlier, running messages during the rogue alert, and had decided not to mention it because everyone was busy. I stared at her. "That is the stupidest sentence I've heard this week, and I recently listened to a councilman speak." She laughed, then winced when she shifted weight. I delivered the tray, found Sabine, and sent her to the kitchens. After that, things happened, because people kept being inconveniently visible. An older wolf named Mr. Vale, not related to any rogue, he assured me twice, sat alone near the conservatory windows, his hands stiff with winter pain. I moved his tea closer, then asked why no one had put a heater near him. "They have larger concerns," he said. "Cold fingers are a concern if they belong to you." He looked startled. So I stole a heater from a decorative sitting room no one used and plugged it in beside him. A teenage wolf in the infirmary tried to pretend the slice across his ribs did not hurt because Nick was standing nearby. I told him bravery was admirable and infection was stupid. Nick coughed into his fist and looked suspiciously amused. By afternoon, I had accidentally offended 3 people into resting, bullied 1 guard into eating, and learned the names of 4 children who had been using the west staircase as a battlefield. "I'm not doing anything," I told Becky, when she found me carrying a basket of clean bandages down the corridor. She hugged a clipboard to her chest and smiled too widely. "No, of course not." "I recognize that face. Stop having feelings for me." "I'm not." "You absolutely are." She floated away, still smiling. The training field behind the estate was cut into a sheltered stretch of grass bordered by winter trees. I had gone out only because Nick insisted I still needed survival lessons, and because Edgar was there, sleeves rolled to his forearms, showing a younger wolf how to control a turn without surrendering balance. I watched him too long. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze found mine across the field, and one corner of his mouth lifted. The bond thread in my chest warmed, subtle as sunlight through glass. I looked away immediately. Nick stepped beside me. "Distracted?" "I'm observing." "You're staring." "I multitask." Before he could answer, a sharp cry split the field. A little girl near the practice rings stumbled backward, clutching her arm. She could not have been more than 7. One moment she was a child with braids coming loose and mud on her knees. The next, fur rippled down one side of her neck. Her fingers twisted into claws. Her eyes flashed gold, wide with terror. The adults froze. Even Edgar stopped. The air changed at once. Every wolf went still, not indifferent but controlled with terrible effort. I understood then what Nick had meant. A frightened young wolf was not harmless. If the adults rushed her, their own instincts could trigger hers. The girl made a broken sound. "Mila," a woman whispered from the edge of the ring, trembling as Nick held up a hand to keep her back. "Baby, breathe." Mila's small jaws shifted wrong, teeth pressing where no child's teeth should have been. She looked horrified by her own hands. My feet moved before anyone gave me permission. "Yvonne," Edgar said carefully, "I know." I did not run. I did not reach for her. I walked into the ring and lowered myself to the grass a few feet away, making myself smaller. Mila snarled. It was not anger. It was fear wearing teeth. "Fair warning," I said softly. "I've had a very strange week, so if you're trying to scare me, you'll need to get in line." Her growl hitched. A few wolves behind me shifted uneasily. I kept my eyes on her face, not her claws. "Your body's doing something rude without asking, isn't it?" Mila's breathing came fast. "I hate when that happens," I said. "Sometimes mine cries in supermarkets. Deeply embarrassing." Her gold eyes flickered. "Can you look at me?" "Just me, not them." I nodded slightly toward the watching pack. Adults are nosy. Ignore them. A tiny broken sound left her. That's it, I whispered. Now breathe with me. In through your nose. Out like you're cooling tea. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she tried. Once. Twice. Her claws trembled. The fur along her neck receded in uneven patches. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her jaw softened back into a child's shape. I held out my hand, palm up, stopping halfway. Only if you want. Mila stared at it. Then she lunged forward and grabbed me so hard her little fingers hurt. I let her. Her mother sobbed. Someone behind me exhaled, like they had been underwater. I wrapped one arm around Mila when she crawled into my lap, muddy boots and all. There we go, I murmured. Rude body-handled. She sniffed against my shoulder. I didn't mean to. I know, sweetheart. Across the field, Edgar watched me with an expression I could not bear to name. Angela stood near him, one hand pressed lightly to her chest. Brian's head bowed, not in submission, but acknowledgement. Nick approached last. He looked down at me, at the child in my arms, then at the silent pack. Well done, Luna, he said quietly. The field went even quieter. I glared up at him. Call me that again in that reverent voice, and I will throw a shoe at your head. Nick's mouth twitched. Noted. I have excellent aim. I never doubted it. Mila giggled wetly into my shoulder. Before I could threaten anyone else, a guard hurried down from the house. Alpha Collins, he called to Brian, breath visible in the cold air. There's someone at the gate asking for Miss Hart. My stomach tightened. Edgar was beside me before I stood, his hand hovering near my back without touching until I shifted toward him. Who? I asked. The guard looked uncomfortable. A pregnant woman. She says her name is Paige Hart. The field tilted beneath me. The guard swallowed and added, She's shaken. She has documents with her. She says they prove what Kevin and Joshua did. Paige Hart's name landed in the training field like a stone through glass. Mila was still clinging to me, her small fingers twisted in my sleeve, her breathing damp and uneven against my shoulder. I handed her gently back to her mother, though my own legs had begun to feel unreliable. Edgar was beside me before I asked, Do you want me there? He said. I looked toward the house, then beyond it to the gates where my stepsister waited with her unborn child, and whatever truth she had finally decided was worth carrying. Yes, I said. But if she says one stupid thing, I reserve the right to be unpleasant. Nick fell into step on my other side. That seems fair. Don't encourage me. I would never. You absolutely would. Paige stood inside the front entrance with Angela near her and Becky hovering uselessly with a blanket, a glass of water, and the emotional expression of someone one tragic sentence away from adopting a grown pregnant woman. Paige looked nothing like she had at the gender reveal. No glossy smile, no smug hand resting over her stomach, no careful polish. Her hair was pulled back badly, her coat buttoned wrong, and her face was swollen from crying. She held a folder against her chest, as if someone might rip it away. When she saw me, she flinched. Good. I was too tired to feel guilty about that. I didn't come for forgiveness, she said quickly. Excellent, I replied. That saves us both disappointment. Edgar's hand moved near the small of my back, close enough for warmth, not touching until I shifted half an inch toward him. Then his palm settled there, steady and quiet. Paige noticed. Pain crossed her face, but it was not jealousy. Not this time. It's about Dad, she whispered. And Josh. Nick's eyes sharpened. Angela led us into Brian's study. The door closed, and Paige lowered herself into a chair, with one hand braced against her belly. For a moment she did not speak. She only stared at the folder in her lap. Then she opened it. Photographs, printed emails, bank statements, screenshots from Joshua's phone, the kind taken in a hurry with shaky hands and fear breathing down someone's neck. I found some of it in Dad's office, Paige said. Some in Mum's things. She keeps copies of everything when she thinks it might save her later. That sounds like Samantha, I said. Paige swallowed. They knew Celine was getting worse. Mum knew. She heard Dad talking to her. After visits. After calls. Her voice cracked. She wrote things down. Angela picked up one page with careful fingers. I could not read it from where I stood, but Angela's expression changed just enough to tell me I did not want to. Paige looked at me. There's a note from Mum. She wrote that Celine cried for 20 minutes after Dad told her you'd be ashamed if people knew about the surgery. My chest went hollow. Edgar's hand firmed at my back. Paige pushed another paper forward. And this. Dad moved money from an old account in Celine's name. There were community donations years ago. For treatment, I think. He transferred them through his business. For one wild second, I heard my mother's voice in the kitchen, soft with embarrassment. It's too expensive, sweetheart. We'll manage. We had not managed. Kevin had made sure of it. Nick picked up the screenshots without asking. His face went still in the dangerous way wolves had when they stopped pretending to be civilized. These messages, he said. Paige nodded, trembling. Josh sent them. I didn't understand all of it. He said some men wanted to know when Yvonne was alone. He gave them times. The cottage, the train, when Edgar wasn't there. My mouth went dry. He knew? I asked. Paige's eyes filled. He said they were just going to scare you. Make Collins back off. He bragged about it after. Said maybe you'd finally learn you weren't untouchable. The room blurred around the edges. Not because I was going to faint. Because if I let myself feel everything at once, I would start screaming and never stop. You waited until now, I said. Paige's tears spilled over. I was scared. So was my mother. She bowed her head. I wanted to hate her cleanly. It would have been simpler, but she sat there with one hand over her unborn child, shaking under the weight of a family that had poisoned all of us differently. Listening was not forgiveness. I made sure she understood that. I'm hearing you, I said. That is all. Paige nodded. I know. The police came before dusk. They arrived through Silvermoon's front gates in plain cars, escorted by Brian's security, and given coffee by Angela with such cool elegance that even detectives sat straighter. Detective Rowe interviewed Paige in the study. Another officer took copies of Celine's letter, the medical records, the intercepted appointment notices, and Mrs. Kavanaugh's signed statement about Kevin's visits and the things my mother had said afterward in whispers over cups of tea. By midnight, Kevin Hart's respectable life had become evidence. By morning, Samantha had begun saving herself. I was not there when she gave her statement, but Mara told me enough. Samantha had cried carefully, admitted selectively, and handed over more documents the moment she realized Kevin could not protect her reputation anymore. She claimed she had been frightened of him. Maybe she had. It did not make her kind. It only made her practical. Kevin was arrested outside his office in Bowral, where everyone could see. That part mattered more than I wanted it to. 2 uniformed officers walked him down the front steps, while the florist stood frozen with a bucket of tulips. The baker leaned out of his doorway, and 3 women from church stared as if someone had peeled wallpaper from the town and found rot beneath. Kevin wore a navy suit. Of course he did. This is a misunderstanding, he said to the officers, voice calm enough for an audience. My daughter is grieving. She's being influenced. I stood across the street with Edgar beside me. Kevin saw me then. For the first time in my life, he looked at me and found no opening. No apology he could twist. No temper he could provoke. No shame he could press until I folded. Just me. Watching. The hearing took place 2 days later in a local courtroom too small for the amount of ruin packed inside it. Kevin's name was read alongside charges tied to coercive control, fraud, interference with medical correspondence, and ongoing investigation into matters connected to Celine's death. Joshua sat behind him, sweating through a shirt too expensive for his character. Samantha kept her face lowered and let her solicitor do the work of making cowardice sound like cooperation. Paige gave testimony with both hands wrapped beneath her belly. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. When the messages from Joshua were entered, the air in the courtroom shifted. The dangerous men had names connected to vehicles seen near the woods, burner phones, cash transfers, and a trail Nick's people had already scented long before human police could give it language. Joshua panicked during the adjournment. He shoved past his solicitor and bolted through the side exit toward the line of trees beyond the courthouse car park. For 3 seconds, Bowrell remembered him as an athlete. Then Nick moved. He did not run like a man. He simply crossed the distance too quickly for sense, caught Joshua by the back of his collar, and put him face first into the damp grass with almost bored precision. Humans always forget forests belong to things faster than them, Nick said. Joshua cursed into the mud. A constable arrived panting, thanked Nick, and tried very hard not to ask how he had done that. By the time the magistrate ordered Kevin held and Joshua taken into custody pending further charges, Bowrell had already begun rewriting itself. Phones buzzed. Whispers spread. Kevin Hart's careful image cracked in public, not with drama, but with paperwork. That was the cruel joke. My mother had been destroyed quietly. Kevin fell by documents read aloud. Outside the courthouse, the winter air hit me hard. I made it 3 steps before my hands began to shake. Edgar noticed immediately. He did not ask if I was all right. He had learned better. Instead, he moved close and offered his hand, palm up, patient as morning after a terrible night. I looked at it. Then I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and certain. "You stood," he said softly. I laughed once, but it hurt. Barely. "Still counts." Reporters murmured near the steps. Locals stared. Samantha cried into a tissue for herself. Paige stood apart, one hand on her stomach, watching me with regret I was not ready to soothe. Kevin was led out between officers. His eyes found our joined hands. For a moment, the old instinct rose. Prove something, wound him back, make him see what he had failed to ruin. Then Edgar's thumb brushed over my knuckles. The instinct changed. I turned toward him. He lowered his head slightly, questioning even then, even in front of everyone. So I answered. I kissed him on the courthouse steps with Bowrell watching. Not to punish Kevin, not to claim victory. Because after all the lies, letters, wolves, graves, and blood, Edgar Collins was the person I wanted beside me when my legs shook. His free hand came to my waist, gentle but firm, and the noise around us thinned to almost nothing. When I pulled back, his eyes stayed on mine, full of something too deep for teasing. Then Nick's phone chimed. So did Edgar's. The bond thread inside my chest went cold. Edgar looked down first, his expression emptied. "What?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. A message sat there from an unknown number. Plain black text on white light. "Surrender the human, or Silver Moon burns." Below it was a name. Ronan Vale. The message stayed on Edgar's phone after the screen should have gone dark. Surrender the human, or Silver Moon burns. For one heartbeat, Bowrell's courthouse steps disappeared. The reporters, the police cars, Kevin's ruined stare, all of it blurred beneath those 6 words. Edgar's hand tightened around mine. "Don't," I said before he could speak. His gaze slid to me, sharp with restrained violence. "Don't what?" "Make the face that says you're about to lock me in a tower." Nick, standing close enough to read the message over his shoulder, muttered, "A tower would be easier to guard." "I will bite you." He looked at Edgar. "She means it." "I know," Edgar said quietly. But his eyes had not softened. Ronan Vale had not sent a threat. He had sent a claim, and every wolf instinct in Edgar had risen to meet it. Brian called within minutes, Angela after him. By the time we returned to Sydney, Silver Moon had become a fortress wrapped in winter quiet. No one said the word trap, but it lived in every room. The Royal Botanic Garden charity event was scheduled for the following evening, a glittering fundraiser with politicians, donors, doctors, old families, and enough photographers to make hiding impossible. Canceling it after Ronan's message would announce fear. Attending would invite blood. So, naturally, I went. "If your plan is to look stubborn in formal wear," Edgar said as Angela's stylist adjusted the deep blue dress Becky had chosen for me, "it's working." I glanced at him through the mirror. He stood in the doorway in a black suit that did unfair things to his shoulders. His tie was dark silver. His hair was neat in the way that suggested several people had tried to tame it, and only partially succeeded. "My plan is to survive," I said. "The dress is decorative." His gaze moved over me once, slow enough to warm my skin, careful enough not to make me feel displayed. "You look beautiful." The room went too quiet. Becky made a sound suspiciously close to a squeak and fled with the stylist under the noble excuse of finding earrings. I turned. "You can't say things like that before battle. It's distracting." "Good." "Edgar." He came closer, stopping only when the hem of my dress brushed his shoes. "I asked you to stay behind because I'm afraid." That stole the teasing from my mouth. His fingers lifted, not touching my face, waiting. I leaned into his hand. His thumb stroked once along my cheekbone, and the bond between us gave a soft, dangerous pull. "I'm afraid too," I admitted. "I know. But Ronan doesn't get to make my life smaller." Edgar lowered his forehead to mine. "No, he doesn't." The Royal Botanic Garden was lit like a dream pretending not to have teeth. Fairy lights wound through old trees. Winter flowers spilled from silver planters. Beyond the lawn, the harbor glittered dark and bright. The opera house glowing across the water as if nothing ugly could happen beneath such a sky. Music drifted from the marquee. Glasses chimed. Humans laughed, unaware that half the elegant guests around them could hear heartbeats quicken from across the room. Angela moved through donors like a queen on campaign. Brian stood near the edge of the crowd, quiet and watchful. Nick vanished and reappeared in different shadows, which was irritatingly on brand. Edgar kept me close. Not possessively, not obviously. But his hand found the small of my back when a stranger stepped too near. His shoulder angled toward mine when cameras flashed. Once Isla Shaw crossed the lawn in a pale gold gown, beautiful enough to make several men forget their wives existed, and Edgar did not even glance at her until I looked first. "You're allowed to notice other women exist," I murmured. "I know they exist." That was not a convincing defense. His mouth curved. "Jealous?" "Observant." I narrowed my eyes. "Do not me." He leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "I like when you're observant." Heat climbed my neck so quickly I forgot my next insult. He noticed that too. Of course he did. When the music slowed, Edgar held out his hand. "Dance with me." I'm terrible at formal dancing. "You fought rogues with a fireplace poker." "Different footwork." He smiled, and I took his hand because apparently I had become the sort of woman who walked willingly into danger if Edgar Collins looked at me like that. He led me beneath the trees, one hand at my waist, the other holding mine against his chest. At first I counted steps, then his thumb moved slowly over my knuckles, and counting became impossible. Around us, the event blurred into soft light and winter scent. "You're missing your chance to say something arrogant about leading," I said. I was enjoying being trusted. My chest tightened. I looked up. His eyes held mine, steady and open, and the bond hummed so gently I almost forgot the threat waiting beyond the lights. Almost. Edgar guided me away from the main crowd toward a path lined with camellias and shadow. The music followed us faintly. For one stolen moment, there were no council eyes, no rogues, no dead mothers, no courtroom steps. Just him. His fingers brushed my bare arm. Cold? No. Liar. Warm me, then. The words left my mouth before wisdom could stop them. Edgar went very still. Then he stepped closer and framed my face with both hands, giving me every chance to turn away. I didn't. His kiss was slow, hidden beneath old branches and harbor light. Not rushed, not hungry enough to frighten me. hungry enough to tell the truth. I held the front of his jacket, felt his heartbeat beneath my fingers, and kissed him back until the world narrowed to cedar, warmth, and the ache of wanting more time. Then, the air changed. Edgar pulled back first. His eyes flashed gold. A bitter scent sliced through the garden. Green, metallic, wrong. Smoke rolled low across the grass. Someone screamed. Edgar shoved me behind him as wolves across the lawn staggered. Angela gripped the edge of a table. Brian swore under his breath. Nick appeared from nowhere, coughing, one hand clamped over his mouth. "Wolfsbane," Edgar said. A dull pressure slammed through the bond. His body stiffened. "Nick," he called. Nick's head snapped up, alarm sharp on his face. Nothing. No mind link. The pack had gone silent. The first attackers came from the service path, dressed in black, moving too fast for humans and too coordinated for chaos. Guests scattered. Silvermoon wolves could not shift openly in the middle of a public event, not with cameras and civilians everywhere. So they fought like shadows. Edgar caught one man by the wrist and turned his momentum into the ground. Nick dragged two others behind a hedge before any human could understand what they had seen. Angela pushed a terrified donor toward the exit with one hand and drove her heel into an attacker's knee with the other. I would have admired her more if my eyes had not been burning. The smoke made me cough, but it did not hollow me out the way it did them. Wolves stumbled under it. Their eyes watered, their movements slowed. Human for once meant useful. A faint mechanical hum pulsed beneath the noise. I turned toward it. Behind the flower installations near the service tents, something blinked red through the smoke. "Yvonne," Edgar said sharply, "I smell machinery. That is not a sentence I enjoy." "Then cover me." He looked ready to argue. Then 3 attackers rushed from the dark, and he had no time. I slipped behind the planters, crouching low as smoke drifted over the path. The smell grew stronger. Hot plastic, chemicals, wet metal. I followed it past a row of orchids and nearly tripped over a black case tucked beside a generator. A small device sat inside, humming like an angry insect. Tubes fed into smoke canisters. Symbols had been carved into the metal casing, old and ugly, glowing faintly red. A man stepped from behind the tent. "Well," he said, "clever human." I grabbed the nearest thing my hand found, a silver champagne bucket, and swung. It hit his face with a satisfying crack. He stumbled. I did not wait to see if he was impressed. I seized a metal garden stake from the flower display and drove it into the device. Sparks spat. The hum continued. "Oh, don't be dramatic," I snapped, and slammed the stake down again. The casing split. A blast of heat struck my hands. The red glow died. For half a second, the entire garden seemed to inhale. Then Edgar's voice tore through my mind like thunder. "Silvermoon, to me." Wolves answered. Not in words I could hear, but in movement, in power, in the sudden terrifying unity of a pack restored. The battle changed at once. Silvermoon wolves drove civilians toward safety, cut off exits, isolated rogues, and shifted only where shadows and smoke concealed them. Edgar stood at the center of it all, no longer only the man I loved. Alpha. Command moved through him like lightning held in human skin. Then Ronan Vale stepped from smoke. He was tall, rough-edged, with cold eyes and blood already on his sleeve. He looked past Edgar and found me. "There she is," he said. Edgar shifted. One moment he was a man in a ruined formal suit. The next, the silver wolf hit the ground with a force that shook leaves from the trees. Ronan shifted to meet him. Their bodies collided beneath the winter branches, silver against dark, violence against violence. But Edgar was not savage. Even in wolf form, every movement had purpose. He drew Ronan away from the wounded. He turned his body between danger and pack. He took pain without surrendering control. I understood then what an alpha was. not the strongest animal in the field, the one who chose where the teeth landed. Edgar drove Ronan down near the edge of the lawn. Nick and Brian closed in. The rogue leader snarled, trapped beneath silver weight. Then Ronan's arm shifted halfway back to human. A blade flashed from his sleeve. He struck Edgar low in the ribs. Edgar's roar split the garden. Nick tore Ronan away. Brian's wolves descended. I ran. Edgar shifted back before I reached him, collapsing onto the wet grass in torn fabric and blood. Dark veins spread from the wound, thin and poisonous beneath his skin. "No," I said, dropping beside him. "No, absolutely not. You do not get to be dramatic now." His lashes fluttered. "Yvonne." Sabine appeared with a medical kit, her face grim. She cut through his shirt, saw the wound, and went still. "Poisoned silver," she said. My hand found Edgar's. His fingers were cold. "Fix it," I demanded. Sabine's eyes flicked to mine, then to the place beneath my collar where no mate mark rested. A completed bond might help stabilize him. The world shrank to Edgar's uneven breathing. "I'll do it," I said. "Tell me what—" Edgar's grip tightened with sudden, brutal strength. His eyes opened, fever bright and furious. "No!" "Edgar." His voice was barely more than breath, but it carried command and fear in equal measure. "Not because I'm hurt. Not because you're scared." Then his hand slipped from mine, and Edgar Collins went still beneath the blood-red moon.
I heard Yvonne first. Not Sabine's orders. Not Nick's furious voice. Not my father calling my name with alpha command threaded through every syllable. Yvonne. "No," she said, and the words sounded like a hand reaching into the dark. "Absolutely not. Edgar Collins, you do not get to collapse after making noble declarations." Pain dragged me under before I could answer. Poisoned silver did not burn like ordinary fire. Fire had mercy. Fire stayed where it touched. This moved through me with intention, a cold blade sliding through blood, bone, instinct. My wolf clawed toward the surface, then recoiled, sick and snarling. Somewhere above me, Sabine's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to move him now." "Will he live?" Yvonne demanded. No one answered quickly enough. That frightened me more than the wound. I forced my eyes open. The world appeared in broken pieces. Grass wet beneath my shoulder, smoke thinning between black branches. Yvonne's face above mine. Her hand was wrapped around mine, tight enough to hurt. Good. Pain meant I was still there. Sabine knelt on my other side, pressing something against my ribs. "The poison is spreading too quickly." "Then stop it," Yvonne said. "I am trying." Nick swore low. Brian barked orders to the wolves securing the garden. Human sirens wailed somewhere beyond the trees, late to a war they would never understand. Sabine looked at Yvonne. I hated that look before she spoke. A completed mate bond could help stabilize him. Yvonne went still. Every part of me rose against the silence that followed. "No," I managed. Her eyes snapped to mine. "You are bleeding on the grass. This is not the time to be difficult." "It is exactly the time." My voice barely existed. The poison had teeth in my lungs, but I held her gaze because if I did not, fear would make choices for us both. Sabine spoke carefully. A bite could strengthen his system enough to fight the silver. It is not a guarantee, but no, I said again. Yvonne leaned closer, fury and terror shaking through her. "Edgar." I tightened my grip on her hand with what strength remained. "Not because I'm hurt," I breathed. "Not because you're scared. Not because anyone tells you it will save me." Her mouth trembled once. Then she lowered her forehead to our joined hands and whispered, "Then don't you dare die after saying something that perfect." I wanted to laugh. Instead, the garden disappeared. When I surfaced again, the world smelled of antiseptic, lavender soap and old stone. Silver Moon's infirmary. I knew the room without opening my eyes. The soft hum of machines Sabine pretended not to need. The winter rain tapping against tall windows. My mother's perfume somewhere near the door. Nick's temper like a blade being sharpened in silence. And Yvonne's heartbeat. Too fast, too close to worry. She needs to rest, Angela murmured. She can tell me that herself, Yvonne replied. Nick exhaled. She has been telling everyone that for 12 hours. Because everyone keeps being wrong. Even fevered, I felt my mouth try to curve. Bad decision. Pain split through my ribs, clean and savage. I must have made some sound because Yvonne was beside me instantly. Edgar? I opened my eyes. She was there, hair pulled back untidily, dress gone, and replaced by one of my jumpers that swallowed her wrists. There was dried smoke beneath her nails. A faint burn marked the side of one hand from the device she had destroyed. Human, they kept calling her. As if that meant fragile. As if she had not broken a battlefield open with a garden stake and sheer refusal. Your hand, I said. She stared at me. Your ribs are full of poisoned silver, and you're worried about my hand. Yes. You are unbearable. I've been told it improves the value of antique rugs. For 1 second her face changed. Grief, relief, anger, love. Too much to name, all of it moving through her eyes. Then she bent and pressed her lips to my knuckles. The touch was brief. It ruined me anyway. Sabine spent 3 days dragging poison out of my blood. There were injections that left black bruises, poultices that smelled vile enough for a lair to gag dramatically from the corridor, and old pack remedies that made my wolf shudder under my skin. The silver wound refused to close. Each time it tried, poison forced it open again. Yvonne stayed. She did not hover prettily. She argued with Sabine about dosage schedules, threatened Nick when he tried to make her eat standing up, sat in the chair beside my bed with one boot tucked beneath her and Celine's notebook in her lap, turning pages without reading them. Once, in the worst part of the fever, I woke up snarling from a dream where Ronan had reached her. My claws had torn through the sheet. Yvonne was already there. Look at me, she said, both hands closing around my wrist with reckless trust. Edgar, look at me. My wolf fought the poison, the room, the memory of blood under the moon. Then her voice came again, steady as a hand on a locked door. I'm here. The bond stirred weakly between us. Not complete, not marked, still there. I breathed because she asked me to. Later, when the fever broke and the windows shone grey with dawn, I found her asleep with her head against the edge of my mattress. Her fingers were still tangled in mine. I lifted my free hand and brushed a curl back from her cheek. Her eyes opened at once. You look terrible, she whispered. I nearly died. Excuses. I'll try to be more attractive during my next poisoning. If there is a next poisoning, I'm marrying Nick out of spite. From the doorway, Nick said, please don't involve me in medical threats. Yvonne did not look away from me, then stopped lurking. Nick wisely left. I should have teased her. It would have been easier. Instead, I raised her hand to my mouth and kissed the burn near her thumb with more reverence than skill. You saved my pack, I said. Her expression closed a little. Praise still made her suspicious when it came too near places she kept guarded. I broke a machine. You restored our mind link. I was angry. You often are. She narrowed her eyes. Careful. You're injured, not immune. I smiled because I could not help it. I love you angry. The words slipped out too quietly to be a declaration, but not quietly enough to hide. Yvonne went very still. I did not take them back. Her fingers tightened around mine. You are not allowed to say things like that when I can't kiss you properly, because Sabine has threatened me with medical consequences. Later then. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. Later. Recovery was slow, which I resented with every part of me. My father resumed full alpha duties, while I learned the humiliating art of walking from the bed to the window without sweating through a shirt. Angela pretended not to fuss, and failed. Becky cried over my soup. Allaire sent flowers labeled "Congratulations on not being dead." Nick placed them in the bin and told me he had improved the room. Yvonne laughed for the first time in days. That alone made the flowers worth their brief life. On the 5th evening, I found her on the infirmary balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching rain gather on the stone railing. I walked out too slowly for my pride, but she did not comment. She only shifted closer when I reached her. The wind lifted the edge of her hair. "I thought I was going to lose you," she said. "I know. I was ready to do it. The bite, the bond, whatever Sabine said." She swallowed. Not because I had thought it through, because I was terrified. I leaned my forearms carefully on the railing. "That is why I said no." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "You nearly died protecting my consent." "No." I turned toward her. "I lived protecting it." Her eyes shone, but she did not cry. Not yet. After a while, she said, "Marriage scares me less than motherhood." I waited. She looked out at the rain. Mum's body was changed by having me. Then my father made her feel broken for needing care, for needing help. Everyone acted as if suffering quietly made her good. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "I know medicine is different. I know you are different. But fear doesn't care what I know." I wanted to take the fear from her and tear it apart with my teeth. Instead, I moved slowly, giving her time to refuse, and drew her into my arms. She came willingly. Her cheek rested against my chest, away from the bandages. I lowered my mouth to her hair. "If we marry, it will not be a cage," I said. "If we have children, it will never be because duty demands it. And if pain, illness, or motherhood ever finds you, you will not face 1 second of it alone." Her hand fisted in my shirt. "Promise me," she whispered. "With everything I am." She lifted her face. The kiss was gentle because my ribs would allow nothing else, but it carried more heat than anything fever had stolen from us. Her lips moved over mine slowly, carefully, as if learning the shape of a future neither of us had dared name aloud. When she pulled back, her breath touched my mouth. "You're still not allowed to die," she said. "I'll put it in my calendar." 2 weeks later, I could stand without Sabine glaring. That was as close to permission as I was likely to get. I asked Yvonne to meet me in the conservatory at dusk. Angela had helped me arrange it, then pretended she had not cried while placing lavender in old clay pots around the windows. The scent filled the glass room, soft and clean, carrying Bowrell and Celine into Silvermoon without stealing either from memory. Yvonne stopped in the doorway. Her eyes moved over the lavender, then to me. "Edgar," she said softly. I was not in a suit. I wore no alpha insignia. No council waited, no pack stood watching. I had not brought witnesses or tradition or duty. Only a ring in my pocket and a heart that had already chosen. "I am not asking as Silvermoon's future alpha," I said. "I am not asking because my pack needs a Luna. I am not asking because Ronan frightened us, or because a bond began before we understood it." Her eyes stayed on mine. I lowered myself onto one knee. My ribs protested. I ignored them. "I am asking as the man who brought your mother lavender, fell into a fountain with you, and has been waiting since a locked door taught me what love should protect." I opened the box. "Yvonne Hart, will you marry me?" For once she had no immediate answer. Then she wiped beneath one eye with the heel of her hand and glared at me. You used lavender. That's cheating. Yes. And you knelt while injured. A poor tactical choice, but sincere. Her laugh broke halfway through. Then she stepped forward and placed both hands on my face. Yes. The word entered me deeper than any mark could have. I stood carefully, and she kissed me before I could reach for her. Her arms went around my neck. Mine settled at her waist, holding her close enough to feel the tremor in both of us. Afterwards, I rested my forehead against hers. The bite waits, I said. Until after vows. Until you ask. Until you are certain. I know, she whispered. That's why the answer is yes. The weeks folded into wedding plans, healed scars, and lavender tied with ribbon. On the night before the ceremony, Tradition and Angela Collins exiled me to the East Wing, while Yvonne slept in the guest room where this had all begun. I lay awake beneath moonlight, one hand over the scar Ronan had left, feeling the unfinished bond hum softly in my chest. I did not cross the house. I did not open her door. I simply let the bond carry what had been true for longer than I had been brave enough to say. I love you. Across Silvermoon, through stone and darkness, Yvonne's breath caught inside my mind.
I heard him in the dark. I love you. The words moved through the unfinished bond as if Edgar had spoken them against my skin instead of from the other side of the estate. I lay in the guest room, where I had once been only a fake girlfriend, staring at moonlight on the ceiling, my breath caught somewhere between fear and joy. For a moment I did not answer, not because I doubted him, because no one had ever loved me like it was a promise they intended to keep. Then I closed my eyes and let my own thought reach for him. You'd better. I already agreed to marry you. Warmth unfolded through the bond. Not laughter exactly, but something close enough to make me smile into the pillow. By morning, Silvermoon had transformed. The legal ceremony came first in the conservatory, small and sunlit, with lavender gathered in clay pots around the windows for Mum. Angela had placed one empty chair near the front with a sprig of lavender tied to its back. I saw it and nearly lost the ability to stand. Edgar saw me see it. He crossed the room before anyone could stop him, breaking whatever pre-ceremony rule Becky had invented. His hand found mine, steady and warm. Still your choice, he murmured. I looked at the lavender, then at him. I know. Angela appeared beside me with a velvet box in her hands. Before we begin. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet set with tiny moonstones, old-fashioned and beautiful without being fragile. It belonged to Edgar's grandmother, Angela said. She wore it the day she joined this family. My throat tightened. I'm not sure I know how to wear heirlooms. Angela's eyes softened. You start by letting yourself belong. That ruined me more than the bracelet. She fastened it around my wrist herself. The legal ceremony was brief. A celebrant with kind eyes said words about marriage under Australian law, while Becky cried so loudly into a tissue that Alaire leaned toward Nick and whispered, If she keeps going, we'll need drainage installed. Nick did not look at him. Make one more joke and I'll install you beneath the floorboards. Alaire straightened. Lovely ceremony. Edgar's mouth twitched. When we signed the papers, his hand brushed mine above the pen. Such a small touch, yet it moved through me like the first strike of music. He looked down at our joined hands, then back to my face, and for one suspended second, the room narrowed to only us. Husband, I whispered, testing the word. His eyes darkened. Wife. The celebrant told him he could kiss me. Edgar waited. Even then, in front of his parents, his pack, and one emotionally compromised cousin. I rose onto my toes and chose him again. The kiss was soft and public, but beneath it was everything waiting for nightfall. The bite, the bond, the life we were walking toward with our eyes open. At dusk, the pack ceremony began. The Silver Moon Grove lay beyond the estate, hidden between winter trees and silver lanterns. The air smelled of damp earth, eucalyptus, and lavender woven through my bouquet. I carried Mum with me in those flowers, not as grief dragging behind me, but as love placed carefully in my hands. The pack stood in a wide circle beneath the moon. So many faces watched me. Once that would have made me lift my chin out of pure defense. That night, I did it because I knew exactly why I was there. I walked toward Edgar, not toward an alpha, not toward a destiny chosen by wolves or old men or bloodlines. Toward the man who had waited behind locked doors, refused to use fear as permission, and held my shaking hands without ever trying to own them. Edgar stood beneath the largest tree, dressed in black with silver at his cuffs. When he saw me, his expression changed so completely that my steps faltered. Brian stood beside him, solemn and commanding. "Yvonne Hart," he said, voice carrying through the grove. "You come to Silvermoon by your own will?" "I do." "You come not as a possession, not as a bargain, not as an answer to fear?" My fingers tightened around the lavender. "I do." Brian's gaze warmed. "Then Silvermoon receives what has already been shown. Courage, loyalty, choice." A murmur moved through the pack. He turned to Edgar. "And you, Edgar Collins?" Edgar's eyes never left mine. "I choose her. Before pack, before title, before instinct. I choose Yvonne." The bond between us flared, bright and unfinished. Nick stepped forward when Brian asked who stood witness for us. His suit was severe, his expression worse, but his voice was steady. "I stand with my alpha," he said. Then his gaze shifted to me, and with my Luna. The entire pack heard it. No teasing, no accident, no hallway joke. A declaration. For once, I did not threaten footwear. Some moments deserved mercy. Becky sobbed harder. Allaire whispered, historic restraint from the bride. Nick's head turned slowly. Allaire lifted both hands. "I'm done." Our vows in the grove were older than the legal ones. Simpler, too. Edgar promised shelter without chains, truth without force, loyalty without condition. I promised to stand beside him, argue when necessary, protect what was ours, and never become quiet just to make others comfortable. That earned a faint smile from Angela. When Brian formally welcomed me, the pack lowered their heads. Not in worship, in recognition. The weight of it settled over me, frightening and beautiful. I was still human, still stubborn, still the woman who had worked motel shifts and cafe counters, and kept coins in jars for a surgery that came too late. But when Edgar took my hand, I felt the pack watching not a mistake, but a beginning. After the vows, Edgar led me away from the circle. No one followed. The grove opened into a smaller clearing where moonlight gathered over moss and stone. Silver flowers grew low near the roots of an old tree, their petals glowing faintly in the dark. Edgar stopped before me. The air between us changed. Not with fear, with waiting. He touched the bracelet at my wrist, then my bouquet, then finally lifted his hand to the side of my neck. His thumb rested above my pulse. "We are married," he said, voice low. "The pack has witnessed. The law has witnessed. But this part is yours alone." My heart beat hard against his hand. He bent close, his mouth near my ear, and the warmth of him made my eyes close. "One last time," he whispered. "Do you choose me?" I opened my eyes. "I chose you before I understood what you were," I said. "I choose you now knowing exactly who you are." His control shook. I felt it through his fingers, through the bond, through the breath he took like restraint had become painful. Then he kissed me. Slow at first, reverent enough to hurt. My hands slid beneath his jacket, finding the solid warmth of him, the life Ronan had nearly stolen, and the future I had refused to let fear claim. His mouth moved from mine to my jaw, then lower, pausing at the place between my neck and shoulder. He waited there too, so I held him closer. The bite was sharp, bright, and overwhelming. Pain flashed, then vanished beneath heat so deep it felt like moonlight entering my blood. I gasped into his shoulder, but he held me carefully, one hand at my back, the other cradling my head as if even the ancient magic had to answer to my comfort. The bond opened, not like a door, like a sky. Edgar flooded through me. Love, fear, tenderness, hunger. Devotion so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. I felt his heartbeat, his wolf, his grief, his joy. I felt the exact shape of his choice, and knew he felt mine answering. His voice came through clear and shaken. My Luna. Not possession. Recognition. I pressed my lips to his throat and whispered, "My Edgar." When we returned to the house, no one cheered too loudly. I suspected Angela had threatened them. Becky cried anyway. Brian kissed my forehead with solemn affection. Nick bowed his head and wisely said nothing that would require a shoe. Later, in our room, Edgar closed the door and stood with his back against it, watching me as though he still could not quite believe I had stayed. I crossed to him first. His hand settled at my waist. Mine loosened his tie. Every touch was careful until it wasn't careful anymore, until it became trust, laughter against skin, whispered names, and the kind of tenderness that made room for desire instead of rushing past it. Some vows were spoken beneath witnesses, others belonged only to the dark. By the time moonlight faded from the curtains, I slept with Edgar's arm around me and his mark warm beneath my fingertips. At dawn, before I opened my eyes, I felt a steady rhythm inside the bond. Edgar's heartbeat. At dawn after our wedding, I woke to Edgar's heartbeat inside the bond. 3 months later, it still found me before sunlight. It was there beneath every ordinary morning, steady while he slept, sharper when he woke, warm when his hand drifted across the sheets to find me. I had learned the shape of him in ways no fake girlfriend ever could. The quiet before he laughed, the exact second his wolf noticed I was near, the way his heartbeat changed when I kissed the edge of his jaw and pretended not to know what I was doing. The morning everything changed again. His heartbeat was calm. Mine was not. Coffee betrayed me first. I'd survived double shifts, funeral casseroles, rogue attacks, Bowral gossip, and Angela Collins assessing me over crystal glassware. But the smell of coffee rising from the breakfast tray made me bolt from bed like the room had caught fire. I reached the bathroom just in time. Behind me, the bedroom door opened hard enough to hit the wall. "Yvonne?" "I'm fine," I called, with my forehead against the cool tile and absolutely no dignity left. "Breakfast tried to murder me." There was a pause. Then Edgar's voice softened. "Can I come in?" That question still undid me sometimes. Not the worry. Not the alpha command he could have used without thinking. The asking. I closed my eyes. Yes. He came in, wearing only sleep trousers, and the kind of expression that made my chest ache. His hair was mussed, one side flattened from the pillow. Under different circumstances, I would have mocked him for it. Instead, I sat back against the bathtub and tried not to look as frightened as I felt. Edgar crouched in front of me. Fever? No. Pain? No. His eyes moved over my face, careful and too perceptive. Nausea? I think the toilet gathered that evidence. His mouth twitched, but worry stayed in his gaze. I felt him through the bond then. Not panic, restraint. A question held behind his teeth. My stomach sank. "What?" I asked. He did not answer quickly enough. "Edgar." His hand settled on the floor between us, palm up, not touching me, waiting. "I noticed your scent changed," he said quietly. "A few days ago." Heat rushed to my face. "And you didn't say anything?" "I wasn't sure, and I wasn't going to make your body news to you before you were ready to know it yourself." The bathroom became too small, too bright, too much like a place where lives split in two. I looked past him to the cabinet beneath the sink, where Sabine had once stocked medical supplies after Ronan's attack. Practical things, bandages, painkillers. Tests. Edgar followed my gaze. "I can leave," he said. "No," my voice came out rough. "Stay outside the door." He nodded once and stood, though every instinct in him resisted it. I felt that too. The pull to protect, to hold, to fix. He left anyway. The test took 3 minutes. I counted every second as if counting could control the result. When the answer appeared, the world did not bloom pink and gold. Music did not swell. I did not press a hand to my stomach and smile like women did in films. I stared at the little lines until they blurred. Pregnant. The first feeling was fear. It came so fast and so old that I could barely breathe under it. Mum's cottage. Medical letters Kevin had hidden. The quiet shame she had been made to carry in her own body. The bed she had sat on when pain had become routine, and abandonment had dressed itself up as marriage. I saw childbirth as a door, and behind it, I saw losing myself. "Yvonne?" Edgar's voice came through the wood. I tried to answer and failed. The bond opened around my silence, and his heartbeat slammed hard once. "Can I come in?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "Yes." He entered slowly. I held out the test. For one dangerous second, wonder broke through him. I felt it. Bright, stunned, overwhelming. Then he saw my face, and he pulled it back so gently, it made tears slip down my cheeks. He lowered himself to the floor beside me, shoulder against the cabinet, close enough for warmth, but not so close I felt trapped. "Whatever you feel first is allowed," he said. That broke something. I should be happy. No. I looked at him. "You should be honest," he said. "Happy can come later, or not in the way people expect. But you don't owe anyone a performance." My mouth trembled. I thought I had made peace with it. With motherhood? With what happened to her? With being afraid of the same things? I pressed a hand over my stomach, then pulled it back as if the gesture itself might demand too much. What if I become a room everyone avoids? What if pain changes me? What if everyone says they'll help, and then they get tired? Edgar's jaw tightened, but not at me. Never at me. He reached for my hand and turned it over, brushing his thumb across my wedding ring. "Then I will be in the room. Every room you want me in. I will not get tired of you needing care. I will not call pain weakness. I will not make you grateful for the bare minimum." His voice dropped. "And if fear comes every day, I will meet it every day." I leaned into him then. He wrapped his arms around me on the bathroom floor, and I pressed my face to his chest, listening to the heartbeat that had become home. He kissed the top of my head once, then rested his cheek there. For a long time, neither of us moved. The days after did not become instant joy. They became small negotiations with fear. Angela found me in the conservatory the next afternoon, sitting among Mum's lavender with a cup of ginger tea I had not touched. She did not sweep in with advice. She sat beside me in an elegant cream jumper and ruined my expectations by saying nothing for nearly a minute. Then she reached over and tucked the blanket more securely around my knees. "I was terrified when I carried Edgar," she said. I turned to her, startled. Angela looked out through the glass toward the winter lawn. I loved Brian. I wanted my child. I was still frightened of what my body would have to do. Both things were true. My throat tightened. "No one says that part." "No," she said. "They prefer women decorated with expectation." I let out a weak laugh. She smiled a little. "We will find doctors who understand fear as well as medicine. You will not be handled. You will be listened to." Later that week, Brian handed Edgar and me a folder without ceremony. "Options," he said. Inside were names of obstetricians, midwives, specialists, and pack healers. The best in Sydney. Some human, some wolf. All discreet. "No obligation," Brian added. "Use one. Use all. Use none. Your decision." I looked down at the folder, then up at him. His expression remained calm, but his eyes were kind. "Thank you," I said. He inclined his head. Family prepares. Becky prepared by buying baby clothes. Far too many baby clothes. I know you said not to, she said, standing in our sitting room with 3 bags behind her and guilt nowhere on her face. But technically you said not to make a fuss. These are textiles. I lifted a tiny knitted hat with wolf ears. This is a hat with an identity crisis. It's adorable. The baby is the size of a grape. A fashionable grape. Edgar, traitor that he was, looked amused. I pointed the hat at him. Do not encourage her. I wouldn't dare. You're encouraging her internally. I can feel it. His smile turned wicked. The bond is a dangerous thing. Nick pretended not to care. He did this while installing soft guards on the sharp corners of every low table in the east wing. I found him kneeling in the hallway with a measuring tape, a toolbox, and the grave expression of a man preparing for war. Nick. He did not look up. Luna. The baby cannot walk. Yet. I am barely pregnant. All threats begin small. I stared at him. He tightened a screw. You married into wolves. We plan ahead. I wanted to throw a shoe at him. Instead, I stood there with one hand resting lightly against my middle and felt something inside me loosen. Not joy yet, but room for it. Closure came uglier. Kevin was sentenced on a gray morning in Bowral, the courthouse steps wet with winter rain. I went because I needed to see the door close. Edgar stayed beside me, his hand warm at the small of my back, his anger hidden so well only the bond betrayed it. Kevin looked smaller in the dock. Not sorry, just smaller. The judge spoke of coercive control, financial misconduct, interference with medical care, and the cruelty of isolation dressed up as respectability. Samantha testified because saving herself had always mattered most to her. Her voice shook under oath. Her reputation shattered in public, piece by piece. Joshua glared until the sentence for his involvement with rogue-linked men was read. Then even he seemed to understand that forests had not been the only things faster than him. Paige did not ask to see me afterward. She sent a letter instead. I was afraid. I was selfish. I let them make cruelty normal, because it was easier than standing alone. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am leaving Bowral before the baby comes. I hope your child grows up in a house where love does not require silence. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it inside Mum's notebook. I did not forgive everyone. I simply stopped carrying them. The first scan was booked 2 weeks later. By then, I could say the word baby without feeling the floor vanish beneath me. Not every time, but enough. Edgar had become impossibly careful with his happiness, as if he were holding a candle near dry leaves. I loved him for it. I also hated him a little for making me love him more. At the clinic, he sat beside me while the doctor dimmed the lights. Sabine stood near the wall, pretending she was there only as a medical consultant and not because she would fight the ultrasound machine if necessary. The gel was cold. I flinched. Edgar's hand closed around mine. I'm here. I know, I whispered. The screen filled with shadows and silver movement. For a moment there was nothing I understood. Then the doctor smiled. There, she said softly. That's the heartbeat. A rapid sound filled the room. Tiny, fierce, impossible. At the same time, the bond between Edgar and me shifted. His heartbeat, always steady beneath mine, faltered. Then another rhythm echoed through it, a small, wild pulse knocking from somewhere beyond both of us. Edgar went completely still. I turned my head toward him, but he was staring at the screen as if the moon itself had spoken. For the first time since I had known Edgar Collins, he had no words at all.
The storm woke my wolf before it woke me. Rain lashed the windows of our room in hard silver sheets, and thunder rolled across the estate with enough force to tremble through the old stone walls. I opened my eyes to darkness, to Yvonne's hand locked around my wrist, and to a sharp flare of pain that was not mine moving through the mate bond. Edgar, she breathed. I was upright before the next flash of lightning lit the room. She sat on the edge of the bed in one of my shirts, one hand braced against the mattress, the other pressed low against the swell of her stomach. Her hair had come loose from its scarf, and her expression held the dangerous calm she wore when fear was trying to get its teeth into her. I dropped to my knees in front of her. "How long?" She swallowed. "Long enough that if you ask me why I didn't wake you earlier, I'll become a widow before becoming a mother." Despite the fear climbing my spine, my mouth curved. Noted. Another contraction took her. Her fingers dug into my shoulder. The bond tightened, carrying an echo of the pressure, the pain, the shock of her body gathering itself for something ancient and unstoppable. I had faced rogues, silver, council politics, and death beneath a blood moon. None of it had prepared me for the helplessness of kneeling in front of my wife while pain moved through her and gave me no throat to tear out. I covered her hand with mine. "Look at me." "I am looking at you," she snapped, then shut her eyes. "Unfortunately." "Breathe with me." "I am breathing." "You are insulting me. It's different." A broken laugh slipped out of her, thin but real. She followed my breath until the contraction eased and her forehead dropped against mine. Through the bond, fear brushed me. Old fear. Not of pain alone, but of hospital rooms and hidden medical letters. Of a woman she loved being abandoned inside her own suffering. I felt my wolf go very still. I did not promise it would be easy. I did not tell her nothing could go wrong. Yvonne hated lies dressed as comfort. Instead I said, "We're ready." Her eyes opened. "Are we?" "Yes." "You sound very confident for a man who once panicked because I reorganized your kitchen." "I did not panic. I adapted under pressure." "You stared at the mugs for 6 minutes." "They had been moved without warning." She huffed, then winced, and I rose with controlled speed. By the time I had dressed and wrapped her robe around her shoulders, Sabine had answered my mind link. Dr. Amari and the midwife were already on their way to the medical wing. My father responded with one clipped acknowledgement. My mother with a silence so full of feeling I felt it through the family bond. Nick answered last. "The corridor is secure." I paused while helping Yvonne into her slippers. "It's a maternity ward, Nick." "Exactly." Yvonne looked at me. "Why do you have that face?" "Nick is guarding the hallway." "Of course he is. If anyone tries to invade during labor, he'll be ready." She gripped my arm and stood carefully. "If anyone tries to invade during labor, tell him to leave some for me." I loved her so fiercely at that moment, it almost hurt. The journey to the medical wing took longer than it should have, because Yvonne refused to be carried. "I can walk," she said through her teeth. "You can also threaten national infrastructure, but that doesn't mean you should. If you carry me, I'll name him after Allaire." I immediately stepped aside. "Take your time." Lightning flashed across the long windows as we moved through the estate. The halls were dim, lit by sconces and stormlight. Pack members had woken. I felt them behind doors and down corridors, silent and alert, their worry pressing against the edges of the pack bond, without intruding. Yvonne felt some of it too now. Not as I did, not through blood and wolf, but through me. Her fingers tightened around mine. "They're listening. They're waiting. For him. For you both." She said nothing, but I felt the tremor in her ease by the smallest degree. The birthing suite had been prepared for weeks. Human monitors stood beside Sabine's old wooden cabinet of remedies. Clean towels warmed near the bed. Lavender sat in a small clay pot by the window because Yvonne had pretended she did not need it, and Angela had pretended to believe her. Dr. Amari arrived with calm hands and sensible shoes. The midwife, May, moved around the room with soft efficiency. Sabine checked Yvonne's pulse, then mine, gave me a pointed look, and said, "You are not the patient." I'm aware. You are radiating alpha stress across 3 floors. Yvonne sank back against the pillows and pointed at me. Ha! Sabine adjusted a monitor. You are also not allowed to bite anyone. That instruction feels targeted. It is. For a while, labor became a world made of intervals. Rain against glass. Yvonne's breath. The steady rhythm of our son's heartbeat on the monitor. My hand in hers. Her body tightening, releasing, gathering strength again. She was magnificent. Not because she was fearless. She was not. Fear moved through her in waves. Sometimes quieter than pain, sometimes louder. But every time it rose, she met it. With anger, with humor, with tears she wiped away before anyone could comment. Once, during a brutal contraction, she gripped my hand so hard I heard one of my knuckles crack. Her eyes flew open. Did I hurt you? No. Liar. Yes. Good. May laughed under her breath. That's usually a positive sign. Yvonne glared at her. Don't encourage him. Hours passed. The storm did not weaken. It threw itself against the estate as if the whole sky had decided to attend. Outside the half-open door, I caught glimpses of my family whenever someone came in or out. My mother sat straight-backed in the corridor with a cup of tea untouched between her hands. Becky stood beside her, crying silently while insisting she was not crying. My father remained near the far wall, arms folded, his calm deep and steady enough that younger wolves gathered around it without realizing. Nick stood at the entrance to the medical wing like an armed boarder. When he caught my eye, he nodded once. No one would come near this room without permission. Not fear, not memory, not ghosts. Then Yvonne's breathing changed. I turned back at once. She stared past me toward the window, but I knew she was not seeing rain. The bond flooded cold, her pulse spiked beneath my fingers. No, she whispered. Dr. Amari looked up. Yvonne. She shook her head. No, I can't do this. I moved closer. You can. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't say that like people say it when they have no choice. The room quieted. Yvonne's hand flattened over her stomach, trembling now. This is how it happens, isn't it? Everyone says it's normal until it isn't. Everyone says women survive until one doesn't. Mum. She tried to breathe and failed. Mum was alone. She was alone and hurt and no one helped her properly. And what if I disappear into this? The words struck something deep in me. I wanted to gather her into my arms and shield her from her own memories. But labor had its own rhythm, and she needed more than protection. She needed truth. I cupped her face, careful and steady. You are here, in this room, with doctors who hear you, with healers who know you, with me beside you because there is nowhere else I would ever be. Her eyes filled. Another contraction rose, and panic caught her breath before pain could. So I reached through the bond, past thunder, past fear, past every locked door the past had built around her. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Not for 1 second. Her eyes found mine. Not for 1 second, I repeated. She drew in a ragged breath, then another. That's it, May said gently. Stay with him. Yvonne gave a wet, furious laugh. I am going to make him suffer later for being useful. I welcome it, I said. Don't sound pleased. I'm very afraid. No, you're not. I have many layers. She held my gaze as the contraction peaked. This time she did not look away. Her fingers locked around mine, her fear pouring through the bond, but no longer alone inside it. I held every piece she gave me. The storm cracked overhead when Dr. Amari finally said, Yvonne, it's time. The room shifted, not into chaos, into purpose. May moved to Yvonne's side. Sabine stood near the monitors, one hand hovering over the old silver charm at her throat. Dr. Amari's voice stayed calm, guiding, never rushing. Yvonne bore down with a sound that tore through me and remade something in its wake. I stayed beside her. I wiped her forehead, let her crush my hand, murmured against her temple, mind-linked when speech became too much. Breathe, I have you. He's almost here. You're safe. She cursed me, cursed biology, cursed the moon for being dramatic and badly designed. Then she cried once, not in surrender but in effort so fierce my wolf lowered itself inside me in respect. And then our son entered the world. For half a heartbeat there was silence. It was the longest moment of my life. Then Ethan cried. The sound was sharp, furious, gloriously alive. My knees nearly gave way. May lifted him, and his cry rose again, then broke into the smallest, strangest growl I had ever heard. Everyone froze. Dr. Amari blinked. Sabine's mouth parted. Yvonne went utterly still against the pillows. Was that? From the corridor my father laughed. Not quietly, not with dignity. A deep, delighted alpha laugh that rolled through the medical wing and startled two younger wolves into answering whines. That, Brian called through the door, sounding prouder than I had ever heard him, is my grandson. Yvonne stared at me, exhausted and disbelieving. Your family is so strange. I bent and kissed her damp forehead. Our family. Her expression crumpled. May placed Ethan against her chest, and the world narrowed to the two of them. He was small, smaller than my hands knew how to comprehend. Dark hair lay damp against his head, and his tiny face was scrunched in outrage at having been removed from whatever warm kingdom he had previously ruled. Yvonne looked down at him, as if she had expected a wound, and been handed proof of life instead. Her tears came silently. Not broken tears, released ones. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped one arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me without taking her eyes off him. He's real, she whispered. Yes, and I'm still here. The words barely made a sound. My throat tightened so hard I had to lower my forehead to her hair before I could answer. Yes, I said. You are. For all my life, I had understood power as something inherited, challenged, controlled. I had felt it in my bones when my father commanded the pack, when my wolf rose beneath a full moon, when enemies bowed because they had no choice. This was different. This was Yvonne's hand resting over our son's back. This was her body shaking from exhaustion, but not abandoned inside it. This was pain met with care, fear answered by presence, history interrupted by love that stayed. I kissed her forehead again, slower this time. You did it, I whispered. Her eyes closed, and for a second she looked too tired even for sarcasm. Then she opened them and murmured, obviously. He was being dramatic and needed supervision. A laugh broke out of me, rough and unsteady. Ethan stirred at the sound. One tiny fist wriggled free from the blanket. I touched my finger to his palm because I had no idea what else to do with all the love burning through me. His fingers closed around mine. Hard. Impossibly hard. I stared. Yvonne looked down, then back at me. Is that normal? For a newborn wolf blood? Sabine recovered enough to step closer, her eyes shining despite her professional composure. Sometimes. Ethan tightened his grip as if offended by the lack of certainty. My wolf went still again, then bowed inside me to something smaller than a loaf of bread and far more dangerous. Well, Yvonne said faintly, that explains the kicking. The door opened a little, and Angela appeared with Becky behind her. My mother's eyes went straight to Yvonne first, not the baby. She crossed the room and touched Yvonne's cheek with trembling fingers. My brave girl, she said. Yvonne's face softened in a way I would never take for granted. Don't make me cry more. I'm dehydrated. Becky sobbed audibly from the doorway. I'm not crying. Nick's voice came from behind her. No one believes you. Yvonne looked toward the hall. Is he still guarding the door? Of course, I said. Nick leaned into view, expression severe. The medical wing remains secure. Yvonne blinked at him. Against what? Unexpected trousers, Allaire called from somewhere farther back. Remove him, Nick said without turning. My father laughed again, softer this time. The pack stirred around us. At first it was only a pressure at the edge of my awareness, like the moment before the moon rose above the trees. Then the bloodline bond opened. Not the mate bond I shared with Yvonne, not the alpha link I carried with Silvermoon, but something older threading through bone and name and inheritance. Ethan's cry had announced him to the room. His spirit announced him to the pack. A tiny pulse moved through Silvermoon. Fierce, bright, offended, alive. Every wolf in the estate felt it. Heads lifted in corridors. Children woke from sleep. My father's eyes flashed with recognition. Nick went silent outside the door. In my arms, Yvonne felt it through me and drew a careful breath. That's him, she whispered. I looked down at our son, still gripping my finger like he intended to claim it permanently. Yes. Ethan gave one indignant little sound against Yvonne's chest. Through the bloodline bond, Silvermoon felt him clearly, stubborn, loud, and already very much Yvonne's son as well as mine.
By the time Ethan was 2, Silvermoon Estate had survived rogue attacks, council politics, poisoned silver, one very determined pregnant Luna, and an infant who discovered at 11 months that alpha blood made cupboard locks a personal insult. Nothing, however, prepared us for bath time. The first warning was the splash. The second was Edgar's voice through the bond, calm in the way that meant disaster had already occurred. Yvonne. I looked up from folding Ethan's pajamas in the nursery. Why do you sound like that? A pause. Then, from somewhere down the hall, came a tiny, furious voice through the family mind link. No pants. Wolf. I closed my eyes. Of course, I muttered. A blur shot past the nursery doorway. It was small, wet, bare-bottomed, and wrapped in what had once been a towel, but now appeared to be a battle flag. Ethan Collins Hart sprinted down the corridor with the absolute confidence of someone who had never paid rent, packed a lunch, or feared consequences. Behind him came Edgar, barefoot, soaked from chest to waist, hair damp, sleeves pushed to his elbows, looking like a man who had negotiated with foreign governments and lost to a toddler. Ethan, Edgar said with careful patience, trousers are not optional. Wolf! Ethan shouted aloud, then threw the bond again, because apparently one audience was not enough. No pants. Wolf. 3 doors opened at once. Becky appeared first, clutching a tiny knitted jumper to her chest. He's expressing himself. He is expressing himself on the antique runner, Nick said from the stair landing. Allaire leaned over the banister, eyes bright with delight. And the young alpha takes the eastern corridor with impressive speed. Look at the footwork, ladies and gentlemen. Untamed, strategic, completely unclothed. Allaire, Nick warned. What? I'm admiring pack potential. Angela swept into view from the opposite end of the hall, holding a pair of little navy trousers as if they were royal decree. Her elegance had survived wars, fundraisers, and political dinners. Ethan had managed to put bath bubbles on her left sleeve. Ethan, she said, voice smooth as silk over steel. Come here, darling. Ethan stopped long enough to consider this. His eyes gleamed gold. Then he laughed and ran the other way. Brian stepped out of his study at exactly the wrong moment and caught sight of his grandson streaking past, with a towel trailing behind him like a banner of rebellion. His face arranged itself into sternness. It lasted half a second. The laugh broke through before he could hide it. "Brian," Angela said without looking back. He cleared his throat. "Ethan, listen to your grandmother." Ethan's answer came through the entire family link, loud enough to make me wince. "No, Wolf." From the stair landing, Nick shifted position, blocking the route toward the main staircase, with the grim focus of a man preventing an assassination. Ethan slowed. Nick lowered himself slightly, arms ready. The hallway went tense. Then Ethan dropped to all fours, not shifting fully, just enough for mischief to become supernatural, and darted beneath Nick's arm like a greased possum. Allaire slapped the banister. Extraordinary. A clean escape beneath the beta's left flank. Nick turned his head very slowly. "Run." Allaire vanished. Edgar tried again near the portrait gallery. He moved with the speed that usually made people forget to breathe. Ethan still saw him coming. Our son shrieked with delight, skidded on wet feet, bounced off the wall, and slipped beneath Edgar's outstretched arm. Edgar stared after him, betrayed. "He learned that from you." I stepped into the hallway with the folded pajamas in my arms. "I have never escaped you naked under your arm." His gaze flicked over me, warm despite the chaos. Not for lack of opportunity. Heat curled low in my stomach. "Edgar Collins," I said, "this is not the time." His mouth curved. "I disagree." Ethan chose that moment to bolt between us, towel gone entirely now. Rebellion fully exposed. I inhaled once. Then I used the voice. "Ethan Collins Hart, stop right there and listen to your grandmother." The entire pack house froze. Not metaphorically. Angela stopped mid-step, trousers in hand. Brian went silent in the doorway of his study. Becky pressed both hands over her mouth. Nick straightened as if command had passed down the corridor. Even Edgar went utterly still beside me, his gaze cutting to my face with startled fascination. Ethan stopped. One wet little foot hovered above the runner. Slowly he put it down. He turned back, lower lip pushed out, eyes still glowing faintly gold. For a second, no one moved. I looked around at everyone staring at me. "What?" It was a motherly tone. Angela recovered first. She walked to Ethan with magnificent calm and offered him the trousers. He took them, just like that. "Excellent," Angela said, smoothing his damp curls back from his forehead. "Use that on Edgar next." Edgar muttered, "Please don't." I smiled sweetly at him. "We'll see." He leaned close enough that his shoulder brushed mine. Water from his shirt cooled against my sleeve, but the bond between us warmed at once. "Luna," he murmured, so softly only I heard, "I would like to remind you that I'm your husband. And I am occasionally cooperative." "Occasionally?" His eyes dropped briefly to my mouth. "When properly motivated." The air thinned between us, even with our son sitting on the runner, attempting to put both legs into the same trouser hole. That was the thing no one had warned me about marriage after children. Desire did not vanish beneath routines, little socks, interrupted sleep, and porridge on furniture. It changed shape. It learned to live in glances across crowded rooms, in hands brushing while reaching for the same cup, in Edgar's mouth near my ear, while our toddler tried to declare war on clothing. Then Ethan growled at the trousers. The moment broke. I crouched in front of him. "One leg at a time, little alpha." "No pants," he said, less certain now. "Yes, pants." "Wolf. You can be a wolf after trousers." He considered this bargain with great suspicion. Edgar crouched beside me, one hand resting lightly at my back. "Your mother drives a hard bargain." Ethan looked at him. "Daddy Wolf?" "Daddy is wearing trousers." Ethan's gaze dropped to Edgar's wet sleep trousers, then narrowed as if checking for fraud. Brian made a sound suspiciously like another laugh. Together, Edgar and I wrestled Ethan into the navy trousers. Angela added the jumper. Becky declared him the bravest dressed child in New South Wales, and cried a little. Nick inspected the hallway for damage. Allaire returned at a safe distance and announced that the final score was toddler 6, authority, emotionally compromised. Ethan, now dressed and triumphant, lifted both arms to me. "Mummy!" There it was, the word that still stole every clever reply from my mouth. I picked him up. He smelled of lavender soap, rain-wet hair, and that wild little spark that was all his own. His arms wrapped around my neck, his cheek pressed to mine. Through the family thread, softer now, came his drowsy thought. Wolf, later. "Yes," I whispered, kissing his temple. "Wolf, later." Edgar watched us, expression quiet in a way that pulled at the bond. I knew that look. He wore it when joy surprised him so deeply, he did not want to startle it by naming it. I reached for his hand. He took it at once. That afternoon we drove to Bowral. Ethan fell asleep before we left the gates, one hand curled around a stuffed wolf Becky had bought him, and Nick claimed was tactically unsound due to excessive softness. Rain had washed the morning clean, leaving the sky a pale winter blue and the roads shining beneath the sun. Edgar drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting loosely over mine whenever traffic allowed. We did not speak much. We did not need to. The bond had become quieter over the years, not weaker. In the beginning it had felt like fire and thunder, every emotion bright enough to blind. Now it was a river under the floorboards of my life, always there, steady, carrying laughter, worry, hunger, irritation, tenderness, the ordinary miracle of being known. As we reached the edge of Bowral, my chest tightened. Edgar felt it. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. "Still your choice," he said. I looked at him, at the man who had said those words before vows, before bites, before everything. I know. The cottage appeared between the trees like a memory that had learned to breathe again. For a long time after Mum died, I could not look at it without seeing police lights, without hearing Kevin's voice on the lawn, without feeling the hollow place grief had dug inside me. But time had not erased the pain. It had made room around it. The porch had been repaired. The windows shone. Rosemary grew in terracotta pots near the steps, alive and stubborn, their green stems reaching toward the light. Lavender bloomed beneath the front window, soft purple against the old brick. Ethan woke as Edgar parked. "Where?" he asked, blinking sleepily. I unbuckled him from his seat. Nana Celine's cottage. His face scrunched with concentration. "Nana?" "Yes," my voice held, barely. "My mum." He looked toward the little house. "She here?" Edgar came around the car and stood beside me, close enough that his shoulder touched mine. "In a way," I said. Ethan accepted this the way children accepted truths adults made complicated. He wiggled until Edgar set him on the path, then took the small bunch of flowers we had brought, lavender, rosemary, and white daisies clutched in a fist much too tight. "Gentle," Edgar said. Ethan immediately loosened his grip by one dramatic finger. We walked slowly up the path, step by step. Past the garden bed where Mum had once tried to grow tomatoes and mostly raised weeds. Past the porch post Edgar had painted last spring because I had stood staring at peeling wood too long, and he had understood without asking. Past the window where I used to see Mum waiting for me when I came home from late shifts. Ethan climbed the first step with both hands, then the second. At the top, he turned to make sure we were watching. "We see you," I said. He nodded, satisfied, then carried the flowers to the lavender pot by the door. He crouched, serious as a tiny priest, and placed them crookedly across the soil. "For Nana," he said. The world blurred. Edgar's hand settled at my waist, not holding me up exactly, reminding me I did not have to stand alone. I crouched beside Ethan and adjusted one daisy that had fallen stem up. "She would have loved you." Ethan touched a lavender flower with one careful finger. "She wolf?" I smiled through the ache. "No, baby." "Like Mummy?" "Yes, like Mummy." He considered that, then patted the pot. "Good, Nana." A laugh escaped me, wet and helpless. "Yes, very good, Nana." We stayed outside for a while before going in. I had learned not to rush grief. It behaved badly when shoved into corners. Inside, the cottage smelled faintly of lemon oil, old wood, and lavender sachets Angela replaced whenever she visited with me. The furniture was simple. Mum's chair sat near the window with a folded quilt over one arm. Her notebooks were kept in a small glass-fronted cabinet, safe but not hidden. The fireplace poker rested beside the hearth, polished now, no longer only a weapon, but part of the room's history. Ethan toddled from corner to corner, narrating what he saw. Chair. Yes. Book. Yes. Dust. Edgar glanced at the spotless shelf. I would not say that near your grandmother. Mummy dust? No, I said firmly. Mummy does not dust unless emotionally blackmailed. Edgar's mouth curved. I've noticed. I gave him a look. You married me. I have never regretted it. The words landed softly, but the heat in his eyes changed the room around us. Even after all this time, he could look at me like the space between us was a door he was waiting for me to open. I stepped closer, just enough for my fingers to brush his. Ethan chose that moment to try climbing into Mum's chair with the determination of a mountain goat. Help, he commanded. Edgar sighed. Our son has inherited your timing. He has inherited your dramatics. He ran naked through the house shouting about wolves. Exactly. We lifted Ethan into the chair. He settled there with his stuffed wolf, suddenly small against the quilt, and began whispering to it in serious toddler language. Sunlight touched his curls. Lavender moved in the breeze outside the open window. For one breath, I saw Mum sitting there instead. Then I saw Ethan. Not replacing her. Never replacing her. Continuing something she had been denied the chance to see. I walked to the mantel, where a small photograph of Mum stood in a silver frame. She was younger in it, smiling shyly at whoever held the camera. Before pain became something she had to apologize for. Before Kevin trained the world to look past what he did in private. I touched the frame. I'm trying, I whispered. The bond warmed behind me. Edgar did not ask what I meant. He knew. Motherhood, marriage, living. Letting joy exist without guilt. All of it. Ethan climbed down from the chair and brought his stuffed wolf to the photograph. Nana, he said proudly, lifting it for her to see. Wolf. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Edgar's arms came around me from behind, careful and familiar. His chest met my back, his breath warm near my temple. One hand rested near the mark at my neck, not over it, not claiming, simply there. A promise I had chosen again and again, the mate bond opened between us, tender as moonlight through curtains. Are you happy? He asked. I closed my eyes. There had been a time when happiness felt like something other people had. Women in warm houses, daughters with gentle fathers, mothers whose pain was believed, lovers who did not turn affection into a debt. For years, I had thought survival was the best bargain life would offer me. Then I lied at a party and called a stranger my boyfriend. I had fallen into a fountain, run from wolves, buried my mother, fought monsters, married an alpha, held my son through his first fever, argued with council members while wearing baby sick on my sleeve, and learned that love was not the absence of grief. Love was what stayed beside it. I looked at Ethan, standing in my mother's cottage, with flowers on the porch, and mischief already returning to his eyes. I looked at Edgar's hand near my mark, at the wedding ring on my finger, at rosemary alive in the window, and lavender growing where sorrow had once rooted itself deepest. Through the bond, I answered him. I'm home. Edgar's arms tightened around me. Ethan turned, saw us, and frowned. No kissing, he announced. Edgar lowered his mouth to my ear. He's becoming very controlling. He gets that from your side. I disagree. I turned in his arms and kissed him anyway, soft and slow, because our son needed to learn early that his parents were embarrassing and impossible. Edgar smiled against my mouth, one hand at my waist, the bond between us glowing with quiet laughter. Ethan groaned with toddler disgust and hugged his stuffed wolf over his face. Outside, wind moved through the lavender. Inside, love remained. The moon had not chosen my life for me. I had chosen it myself. And this time, love stayed.
The sky is falling, the ground shakes. We're standing still as the world breaks. I see the fear inside your eyes, but I won't let this be goodbye. If this is the end, just stay with me. One last kiss, that's all we'll need.